Muted.
Yeah. Now what? I'm telling you.
Not muted.
She said you know.
Okay, I'm gonna ask. Yeah, check up. Not watch. I'm looking up on mine right now. How to switch the back camera? Okay, everyone. Valentina is gonna be your live streamer. Okay. You don't want to do this? Okay. So try to figure out so that the cat. You have to figure out how the phone films. You want to film. You want to go in front of the session and go from the front. You understand? And try to keep the camera super steady. Go to the front. Everyone's the front. Yeah, with the camera. Come.
No más.
There was one on the cover, totally, you see on the side? No. David was one of the main philosophers of I don't know, last 20, 30 years, talking about the idea of equality. He brought a lot of joy to his life, hence this necessity.
No necesitas ese producto, no lo necesitas. Pare de comprar, 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 pare de comprar. Hay amores que nunca
If the police come, everyone separates the groups of five. If the police come, everyone separates. If police come, everyone separates the groups of five. Yeah, split the groups. If police come, separated groups of 5 people. If police come, separated groups of 5 people. The police come, separated groups of 5. Separated groups of 5. Okay. If the police come, separated groups of 5. There it is. They know what they're doing. They're very smart. It's a whole very high level. Thank you, everyone. Stopping soon. We're stopping soon. You see what happened. So really the minuses, we can't see exactly what's happening, so I can kind of aim it to understand. Right? We couldn't switch the camera. Take it. So it's kind of smooth. Well, I need to adjust something. Okay, just remember, aim it a little this way because the camera is facing up. Okay. One hand. Go to one hand. The front. Just follow. I'm gonna guide you. You're gonna film them. But listen. Now walk backwards.
Basto.
Get to the front with me. Together.
No.
So I can guide you to the front. Everybody. Stay with me. Valentina.
de comprar, pare 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 de comprar, cosas que están de más, pare de comprar, 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 pare de comprar.
¿Tienes zoom? ¿Perdón? ¿Tienes zoom? Es un procession con un personaje famoso, David Graeber, un artista. Es muerto un año antes. Y esto representa la iglesia de StopShopping en Nueva York.
Pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar. Mucho consumismo, demasiado consumismo. Pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar. Cosas que no necesita. Pare de comprar, 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 cosas que no necesita. Pare de comprar, cosas que no necesita. Pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar, cosas que no necesita. Pare de comprar, 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 pare de comprar.
Because what's his name? So you spell lost?
Pare de comprar.
I told them, go to cafe. I called the provider. There's not one provider. You should go one up into another. Like,
Pare de comprar, pare de no necesita, pare de comprar, termina de comprar, pare 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 de comprar, oh, pare de comprar, pare de comprar.
who's going to do it? Who's going to do it?
We should have go to the.
That's amazing.
Pare de comprar, pare de comprar, pare de comprar leceras, pare de comprar, 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 pare de comprar. Pare de comprar, 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 pare de comprar,
Yeah, I know.
Para de comprar, 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 no le compre, para de
My name is Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. If everybody needs a haircut, my barber's right there. Randy, we're giving you advertisement on Zoom. I think it's closed for lunch.
The age is Reverend Abel.
Reverend Bill, you know, right? What?
You're gonna meet with the
Your boss? Okay. Is this the?
No, Nita, it's a small place. Do you know the address?
No,
No, they know.
I was there once. I don't remember where it is.
Yeah.
Having fun? Take off your.
Maybe long the blood. She's saying,
Which look?
Hey, like, hey, you know, Billy.
Now we are going with the bus.
Sí.
Entonces,
Paz, paz, deseo vasto, 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 desconocido, ido, ido, deseo paz, 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 deseo paz, 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 deseo vasto, 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 desconocido, ido, deseo paz. deseo paz, 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 deseo paz, paz, deseo paz.
Thank you. It's a beautiful song.
Deseo paz, 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 deseo paz, 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 deseo pasto, 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 desconocido, ido, ido, deseo paz, 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 deseo paz, 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 deseo pasto, 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 desconocido, ido, ido, deseo paz, paz, paz.
No. Oh.
You have responsibility. One black thing. And that's it. We just kind of plug in the computer in. Once the call back is any question. I don't know. You're not going to use the computer to run around. It's okay.
Hey, Valentina.
Desconocido, pido, pido, deseo paz, 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 deseo paz, paz, paz.
Qué bonito y qué mensaje tan claro, tan sentir. Wonderful, simple message. Look, we too. Welcome to the. ¿Hablas español o algo better in English or whatever? English. So welcome to the Vaticano. Vaticano, Pato means doctor in Spanish. And the idea was to build a little chapel dedicated to plastic ducks. Why? Because they haven't harmed anybody. They are very, very, very cute. And they are, please come, they're charming.
It gives you some ideas.
Yeah.
Let's do a chain.
Hey. Hey, I know. There's always nothing.
Moi, ce que les chiens parlaient, voilà.
Hey, yes, yeah.
Ich habe neulich Englisch geredet beim Hausbesuch mit einer Tschechin und einem Mexikaner, die aber beide mehrere Fremdsprachen können. Mann, jetzt werden manchmal Worte. Unglaublich.
Yeah.
See you later.
See you later.
We have these paintings done by and in this particular moment, she's in a very difficult situation. She lives on the island of Las Palmas. She is now in the middle of a terrible volcano eruption and might be losing her house. And this is it's incredible. It's just these things. I mean, of the incredible things that have happened. She's there. And so we've been in contact with this. Nobody's been hurt. Nobody's been wounded. But it's just tragic to see all these old houses going away. And they're all very different things. This is also for me very important. This is a painting by Romano Mussolini. I'm part Italian. He was the son of Benito Mussolini, the dictator. And imagine this, the son, that's a picture of him young with his father as a dictator. And that's him nearly at the end of his life. And he was, 2006 he died. And this guy, one of the most terrible dictators, dedicated his life to playing the piano and painting clowns. He painted hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clowns. Some psychologists could study this, you know, your father's the dictator and you paint clowns. And we have a clown, that's his painting. So Romano Mussolini, and for any Italian, that rings a lot of bells, you know, very strange. We have on the walls our saints. We have many saints, different saints. That's Giuliano l'Apostata, one of the last Roman emperors who wanted to end Christianism and go back to worshiping the old gods. Because he loved Mother Nature and very interesting things. This is one of the most famous paintings of El Greco, but we modified it a bit. So there's me, my ex-wife, and my son, and behind all the people that have helped us building this chapel. And so that's also the way of saying that we have entered the history of Spain. Yeah. There are many things over there from the Soviet Union. I have a 1954 plastic duck made in the Soviet Union. It's there. And so at the time of the Cold War and atom bombs and hydrogen bombs, and the North Korean War and Korean War and all this, there were still people in Russia making plastic ducks, which I think is a very, and so there were people making plastic ducks in the United States, and the same people making plastic ducks in Russia. I'm sure they had something to do with each other. So these are Soviet Union plastic ducks from 1954. And we have loads of other things. And this too is for me very important. This is it's a French book. It's François Rabelais, and it's a story of Pantagruel. And you see the date. This is a book, a comedy book, making jokes about the Catholic Church. And it was published in 1789 in Paris. There was a revolution, and finally, they could publish comedy books about religion, because before you would have been burnt if you made a book like that. So this book of François, and this is an actual edition. You can see the date. It was at the French Revolution. They started to print comedy books making fun of religion.
Amen.
Yeah. So anyway, and you are Russian. Who is there is a Russian person here?
Me?
He is. Oleg Popov was my friend. We performed together, and I have a Oleg Popov scarf from his show. Wow, how did you? Oh, beautiful. Thanks for the It's a poetry in 3 dimensions. There's a little poem that you can enter and walk around. And then on Sundays we do, this is Oleg Popov's scarf. He uses it always in his shows. This is me with Slava Polunin and Oleg Popov just a few months before Oleg Popov died. And that's his funeral. And I like this picture. This is there's a circus in Russia. Thousands of people in the street waiting to see the body of Oleg Popov, the clown, and he put his clown in the ring, in the circus ring that they exposed him. Yes, and imagine that thousands of people coming to honor a clown. And so again, we have him here, and I think, quite honestly, I think what I have heard and what I've read in the last few days, this must be something to do with him too. The idea we're honoring small things, small, powerful little things, instead of the big things, in a small little place, and doing this with trying to make this beautiful, trying to have fun, of course. People who helped me here making this. A lot of people work professionally in theaters, and they've helped me. We have used recycled goods. Loads of these things here were found in the street, furniture, pieces, or whatever, and then people have helped me decorate them and put them in here. We have been attacked 5 years ago. The right-wing people came, smashed the doors, and threw a petrol bomb here, and all this burnt.
Oh my God.
And we saved one of the dogs there. He is one of the dogs that were recuperated from the.
It's melted.
It melted, yes, and there were angels, plastic angels melted too. We just scooped that up, and now we've got metal doors to stop people coming in. But, yeah, so imagine a plastic dog being attacked by fascism.
It's a victory, actually.
Yes, it's a victory, of course. In a way, that's a victory. It's a victory. Yeah. And then we have some of our gods, Groucho Marx up there. Nietzsche is dead. God is dead. Nietzsche is dead, and I don't feel too well either. And the other one is the religion is considered truth by the people, fake by the intelligence, by the intelligentsia, and useful by power.
Yes.
And that was written in the 1st century, but not so bad. The teacher of it's not Socrates, it's
Plato?
Huh?
Plato?
Seneca.
Seneca.
Yes, that's right. Seneca. And so this celebration all over the world, I see that in many places that this has been done.
Today, yes.
If I am here, and if we are here, the menu is here also. A lot of people working here.
Are we on schedule? How are we doing?
If you go, if you.
No.
Just checking. Just checking.
They'll
It's
wait for
because-
us, I hope. It's all activist time, right?
It's so important today, in my opinion, is to make contacts and that we know each other. And this is fantastic. I've seen you, I've known you. And taking pictures so that we can have them in here. And especially if we dedicate ourselves to the vulnerable people, the people who don't have power. I mean, it's easy for people to have power, who have power to be in contact. They are all the time in contact.
Yeah.
But the normal people don't have time to be in contact. Normal people have to work. Normal people have their children to look after and a million other things to do. And so, and this has been the role of us. I consider myself a clown, a buffoon, a circus jester, a court jester.
Yeah.
And this has been a fight of the court jesters for ever to try and be in contact with each other and find strength in the fact that we exist, that we know that there are in other countries people doing the same thing
Yeah.
and feeling the same things. And so when I was asked to participate, then I thought this is wonderful, and wonderful the fact of keeping this up and trying to create a web of people who share the same principles, the same ideas. And so,
Stay in contact.
yes,
Amen.
you know what? We do it this way. We do quack, quack, quack 3 times and a cheer. This is one of the things important.
Yes.
So I'll
Direct us.
It's very, very important. People, hacer el milagro también. People say, why do we have to do quack, quack 3 times and a cheer? And I say, because ducks, plastic ducks have power that you can't imagine. I'm going to do something that another clown did 2,000 years ago. Are we ready? Whatever. Let's see. Because of this, the show has been running for 2,000 years because of this. So all together. Quack, quack, quack. Yeah! Thank you so much for stopping by in the Dutch church, El Vaticano, la Iglesia Católica, as we say in Spanish. And again, this is now part of this history here. And you are part of this little history here. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Agua es vida. 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 Agua es vino. Agua es vino. Bravo.
There's one thing nobody's ever said, if the wine that Jesus made was any good, you know, in fact, it's not so good. It's like cheap wine. Anyway, again, what?
The fish.
The fish?
Yeah, and the bread.
There's a supermarket there.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much for coming.
Gracias. Gracias.
Amazing. Amazing.
Okay.
That's great.
Hello, everyone.
Ahí está, ahí son. No, no, no.
Tampoco la-
Aló, aló. on off. When they need that juice. Uno, dos, tres, uno. Again, picture, we must have a picture. Oh, that's it. Picture together. Are we pushing to something? I don't know. Manu, come along. That's it.
Amen. Praise be. Quack, quack, quack,
Yes.
hallelujah.
I'll take this off a little while. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Vamos. Adiós.
Ciao.
Close. Pause, like 10 minutes left? Pause. Is it like 10 minutes left from here? Yes.
It's very close.
We are right there.
Hello? No, she has, yes, I do. It's inside the crate. It's a little square thing. It's a USB-C. It's a little square thing. Also, in the bag, there's another one. The bag that you have in the store. But both. The little one is a little square. It says HDMI on one side, USB on the other. Okay, perfect. Hey, we're headed now. We're headed now to the plaza, and we arrived there pretty much at 3 o'clock.
Cantar la canción de la paz.
This way.
All right, I'm gonna mute for a little while. I'm gonna keep the video on because we're not singing right now. But when we start singing, I am gonna unmute.
Yep. Okay.
I was wrong. We started singing.
David used to say that anarchism was not his identity, but rather something that he did. And that simple description really describes his approach to life. He was that rare academic. He was that rare academic who believed that ideas were not just for contemplating in an ivory tower, but that they found their truest meaning when put into practice. Unlike so many others in the academy, who are increasingly narrowed in the scope of what they consider because of the nature of academic specialization, David was never subject to the cant of the university. He had a brilliant mind. He ranged far and wide in synthesizing ideas.
Hey, you can't get. Okay, she needs to do mirror display and make it 1080 by 1920. She has to set her the 1920 by or she can set
Unlike so many others in the academy who are increasingly narrowed in the scope of what they can consider.
Okay, I'm right there.
Everything is fine. Everything is fine.
How
We
are
set
you?
up.
Hey. Paco, can you do me a favor? Hold this and just film everything because this is going into the chat.
Ah, okay.
Are we streaming to David's friends?
Yeah.
Hi. Glad to be here with the Stop Shopping Choir. With David. We've been singing Stop Shopping across Madrid. Pare de comprar. Now we just arrived here at the scene of the memorial.
Excuse me. We're trying to right now set up the screen here. We definitely need the sound.
Yeah, the thing is, if it's recording and
no, it's not that, and it's not for people here.
yes,
So apparently Zoom.
Hello, Madrid. Madrid, tell us what's going on.
We have some feedback issues, and we're going to solve it in 5 minutes. So
Great.
just give us some 5 minutes.
Should we hold tight and wait for you?
I think that's the idea. There's always hassles with live events.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, we're recording this.
Yeah, they're recording.
Great.
Testing. You guys hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so we got rid of the feedback. Okay.
And can you hear us?
Yes, beautiful. You guys sound beautiful.
Yeah.
So the only thing is that for people who come into the zone who are on the chat, who are inside the Zoom, if you have your audio on, we're gonna get this thing called feedback, which is this explosion of sound. Mute yourself. Sound here, sound. You can hear it. Can you guys hear us well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear us? Madrid, hello?
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Amazing. Nika, do you want to kick us off then?
Okay. So I prepare it because I'm afraid to talk about Stop. So
Can anyone other than Nika stay muted?
Do you have a charger for the phone? Yes. I can just plug it in here. Because I'm it's possible. And the charger
Is your camera on?
and one and one
Nika?
more thing. Okay.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Really? Okay. Cool.
you're a little bit quiet, so if you speak quite loudly, because I think you're far away.
Okay.
Put the volume high.
So it was 1 year since.
Stop. Can we do how's the sound now?
Sounds good.
Now go. Let's change the sound. Let's change the microphone. Sorry.
So we planned for the David Memorial a public art project, a chalk mural to combine a street theater, painting, and online assembly of the people worldwide. We call it visual assembly. Later, Clive Russell, who helped me to organize that, will describe what we try to do. And we applied for permit from Madrid city government through respectful art institutions many times for months, and at the end we got rejected. So all what we put now is was done in a couple of days. So apparently it's dangerous to, undesirable to paint with the chalk on the street and swim in the public squares. So we changed our plans, rearranged everything, and it looks like we got a present from Madrid government, because instead of doing art projects, that's, we can do any time, and we will do this because it's important and that's what we do. Instead of that, we will talk and we will concentrate on politics. So the city 500 years ago started colonialism and expansion to Latin America, and here the civil war was lost to the fascists. And now on the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, which is a perfect time to talk about why so often the promise of care and protection end up with oppression. So David Graeber used to say that prisons claim to take care of their inmates. They provide them with housing, food, even medical attention, yet it is the worst place to be. While mothers take care of their kids to let them play, prisons is here to punish and control. David's father fought in Spanish Civil War. David's mom was a refugee from Russian Empire in the times of pogroms. Ruth Graeber was also a friend of the activist singer Woody Guthrie. The legacy of the Graeber's family is connected so much to this country anarchist and anti-fascist movements. And it's worth talking about why in this times, what should we do? So if David will be with us, he would just say, okay, let's guys all talk and let's figure out how to save the world, because the world is becoming a dangerous place. So now I pass over to James Schneider, who's a longtime friend of David, who indirectly introduced me to him. And yeah, and then we will have open mic and street dinner, and Madrid people will come a little bit later, most of them, because it's working time and siesta here. So stay with us for open mic, and yeah, then there'll be more of us offline.
Thank you, Nika, and thank you so much for organising today. It's an amazing thing having you guys there in Madrid and being able to see you, and first of all, having all these great people who are here to speak about David and about how we move forward. So we'll have just under an hour of contributions from named people, and then an open mic afterwards at wherever you are in the world. That starts at the next hour. So the first person I'd like to invite to speak, and if everybody can try to keep their contributions to under 5 minutes so we can get everybody in. Is Sean Antonio Mendez Rodriguez from Chiapas, Mexico here on the Zoom? Or no, are you in Madrid with everybody? With the procession?
Who are you after again, James?
I was after Sean Antonio Mendez Rodriguez, who I think is with, there he is. You can unmute so we can hear.
¿Micrófono dónde está?
Sí.
¿Aquí? Ya. Porque ahora el otro.
No, aquí.
Ah, ya. Ah, tú más fuerte, ok.
Hola.
Hello.
Bueno,
Sound check, can you hear him?
Yeah, all good.
bueno, buenas tardes. Aquí donde estamos son tardes, pero pues, allá donde estén serán buenos días, buenas noches, según la hora en que estén.
Good evening. Here where we are is evening, and wherever you are, maybe morning or night.
Bueno, yo soy Juan Antonio Shun, vengo de Chiapas, México.
I am Juan Antonio Shun, and I come from Mexico, Chiapas.
Y vengo con todos ellos y ellas.
Vengo with them all, ellos y ellas.
Bueno, pues la verdad es que me siento un poco nervioso. No conocía la historia del compañero de quien se está haciendo nombre este día.
I feel a little nervous because I didn't know the history of the compañero who we are like honoring today.
Y bueno, me disculpo también por eso.
I apologize for that.
I think we might have lost you.
Sin embargo,
I believe that if there's something that unites us all people.
Internet está mal.
El internet.
Bueno. Bueno, en México existe la idea, existe la idea de que se celebra a la muerte.
In Mexico, there exists the idea that death is celebrated.
Pero en realidad nosotras, en nuestros pueblos, yo soy de un pueblo indígena.
But the truth is that nosotras, I am from an indigenous community.
En realidad lo que celebramos es la vida.
What we actually celebrate is life.
La vida a partir del recuerdo que tenemos de las personas.
Life departing from the memory that we have of people.
Y por ahí hace mucho tiempo los compañeros y las compañeras zapatistas sacaron un texto que la pueden buscar, que es La Flor de la Palabra.
And a few years ago, the compañeros and compañeras zapatistas, they released a text that you could search for called, ¿cómo se llama?
La Flor de la Palabra.
La Flor de la Palabra, like the flower of the word, something like that.
Bueno, en realidad creo que el texto correcto se llama No morirá la flor de la palabra.
And then the full name I think is No morirá la flor de la palabra.
Y lo traigo ahorita porque es un texto, es una reflexión, es un recuerdo dedicado a todas las personas que ya no están con nosotros y nosotras.
And I bring it now because it is a text that talks about all the people who are no longer with us.
Pero que ahora nosotras y nosotros somos la extensión de ellos, somos la extensión de su palabra.
But then now us are the extension of their word.
El texto dice más o menos como, no morirá la flor de la palabra.
The text says more or less something like, the word of the flower won't die.
Podrá morir
It may die.
Quien la nombra hoy.
Who names the flower today.
Todos nosotros y nosotras estamos hoy teniendo una palabra.
All of us here now, we have a word.
Y bueno, El texto es muy largo, simplemente ya quiero llegar a lo que les quiero decir.
The text is really long, but now I would like to get to what I want to say.
Que es que nosotros en la vida, mientras vivimos, tenemos la posibilidad, el
I think we're losing you.
ya no estemos aquí.
You've disappeared. Nika?
Excuse me? Oh.
Okay, while we wait for them to come back, I'm going to ask if Jeremy Corbyn will say a few words.
So yeah, we're talking about words, speaking, okay?
We can hear you now,
So-
yeah. Sorry, Jeremy.
Okay. So it is important to think about the words that we want to leave when we go.
Ya que eso, al estar con vida, tenemos ese poder, esa posibilidad, y muchas veces la palabra no la usamos bien o la usamos para decir cosas que no ayudan a los que vienen.
And sometimes because only when we are alive, we have the power to speak. And sometimes we speak without helping those who are coming after us.
Y digo los que vienen porque nosotros como pueblos originarios de México, porque yo soy de allá, pero seguramente en otros mundos hay otros pueblos originarios.
And I say that because I am from originary indigenous people from Mexico, because that's where I am from.
Tenemos muy presente y siempre nos remarcan en nuestro crecimiento que la vida es más amplia que nosotros mismos en este tiempo, que la vida va a seguir.
And we have very present and on our upbringing, we have very clear that life is going to go on beyond us.
Y no tiene nada que ver con que si yo quiero tener hijos o no quiero tener hijos, o si por qué voy a traer hijos a este mundo tan violento, sino que la vida va a seguir a pesar de nosotros.
And it has nothing to do with whether we're going to have children or not, or family or not. It has to do with the fact that life goes on without us.
Y entonces somos responsables del futuro, bueno, pues sí, somos responsables de ese futuro en el que habrá esa otra vida. ¿Y qué es lo que queremos dejar? ¿Cuál es nuestra palabra que queremos dejar? ¿Cuáles son los trabajos que queremos dejar?
So we are responsible for that future. And we need to think, what word do we want to leave? What is the word that we want to give? And la palabra, el trabajo y qué? El futuro que queremos. And the future that we want to inherit.
Entonces, cuando hablamos de la palabra, de que no morirá la flor de la palabra, estamos hablando de la reflexión, estamos hablando del corazón, estamos hablando de los deseos que queremos construir para nosotros mismos en este momento y para quienes siguen.
So when we speak about the word of the flower, we're talking about our desire, our heart, and nuestro deseo, nuestro corazón y qué más.
Y el futuro que queremos construir.
And the future that we want to build.
Bueno, creo que ya me estoy extendiendo.
I think I'm extending a little bit.
Solo les quería decir que muchas gracias.
I just wanted to thank you.
Y muchas gracias por hacerme partícipe junto a ellos. Bueno, gracias a ellos que me invitaron también.
And thanks to make me part of this, and also to the choir.
Y ahora mismo estoy conociendo a otra persona que, como les dije, lo siento mucho, no los conozco tampoco a ustedes, pero bueno, aquí estamos aunque sea a distancia.
And now I'm meeting you, and I'm knowing new people and all of you, and here we are now, even though it's on a distance. Gracias.
Thank you. can we have now, please, Jeremy Corbyn? Dana, can you unmute Jeremy, please?
Thank you, James. Thank you very much for inviting me onto this call. I will keep to less than 5 minutes because clearly a lot of people want quite rightly to pay tribute to David. And Nika, thank you so much for inviting me and Laura to attend this and to speak at this event, because it's hard to believe that this time has passed since David went away from us. And I just want to say thank you to you and to James and so many others for what you've done to commemorate David's life, but also a huge thank you to David for his solidarity that he gave me many times during my period under enormous pressure from right-wing media and many other sources in this country and indeed in this world. David had this amazing imagination, an imagination to challenge the economic norms, to promote the Occupy movement, to empower people, and to reach across those that were committed anti-racist fighters, that were committed environmentalists, but also committed to representing workers often in very difficult industries and quite polluting places. So David had this imagination that could bring people together and make the economic alternatives to free market capitalism, to greed, to overconsumption, to damage the environment, something that was understood and popular. And so David may not have left behind huge amounts of physical achievements. In reality, very few of us do. But what he left behind was a message of imagination and of hope. And look at the people that are on this call together. We just heard on behalf of the indigenous peoples of Mexico and indeed indigenous peoples of many other parts of the world that David spoke up for, just as much as he spoke up for the oppressed of inner city Britain. What David did was inspired and changed minds. And if you've changed minds and given inspiration, then you've actually laid the seeds for a long-term, much more hopeful, much more participatory future for all of us. Nika, James, thank you very much for putting on today. And in David's memory, let's do that work. Let's do that work to bring about an environmentally sustainable world, which means challenging the concept of eternal growth and eternal growth in consumption, because you can't have that and environmental sustainability at the same time. David knew that and understood that. And it's up to all of us to learn his lesson, but above all, the wonderful, brilliant, open mind that he had. I'm not surprised that Woody Guthrie was a family friend. It kind of all fits together. David, thanks so much. Nika, thanks so much. James, thank you for hosting today's event.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you. Now we're going to, can we have Astra Taylor, please? Astra, are you there?
I am. Can you all see me?
Yeah, see and hear you.
Okay, see and hear me. Okay, great. I just want to echo everyone's thanks. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you, Nika. Thank you, everyone. A few days before David passed away, I got what would be my last text from him. We were trying to figure out a time to talk, and he said, "No idea of time. Time is being reinvented." And for our friend David, everything was reinventable: our economy, our society, our values, ourselves, and even apparently time itself. And I was thinking about how time was different with David. I went through our correspondence after he passed away and was struck by how instantaneously we became friends. A single coffee in the West Village in 2009 was all it took. And that was just how David operated. I don't think I was particularly unique. There was an openness about him, a willingness to let people in. And, given how prolific he was as a writer, incredibly prolific, he obviously spent a lot of time reading and in the solitude of writing. But he was also incredibly gregarious and always up for a phone call or for gossip, for a walk around an antique market. And that sociability fed into his activism. In August of 2011, David sent me an email trying to get me to go to the planning meetings of what would become Occupy Wall Street. And he basically said, "Look, this is a lot of fun for geeks like me." And I didn't make it to those planning meetings, but I went the first day. And I remember how pleased David was at Zuccotti Park, and he was like this radical maitre d', like welcoming us into the space and checking on our progress as we had these democratic assemblies. And David, you know, he didn't push me into the Occupy movement, but he kept opening these doors for me, and I kept walking through them. And I became more and more involved and more invested. And soon he roped me into a movement focused on, and it came out of Occupy, a movement focused on the problem of debt. And one of our opening salvos was a propaganda video featuring a dozen of our friends in balaclavas dancing around a burning trash can, lighting their debt notices on fire. And David is, you know, there among the throngs dancing. And he wrote this communique style voiceover. And I just want to read a few lines. He wrote, "We ultimately understand that to be able to take care of our children, our friends, our families, the people we care about, is a value that no accountant can ever measure, that no government loan administrator or hedge fund manager can ever have the right to take away from us. Every dollar we take from a fraudulent subprime mortgage speculator, every dollar we save from a collection agency is a tiny piece of our own lives that we can give back to our communities, to those we love and respect." And for David, the debt resistance movement he helped inspire was all about love. And over time, it's grown into a proper organizing effort. In the US, you know, my friends and many of us have carried the torch, and we've erased, because of David, we've helped erase billions and billions of dollars of debt for people across this country. And that's just one of the many things that he helped ignite. David, as we all know, he had very strong views, but he wasn't dogmatic. He wasn't sectarian. I'll never forget a public conversation we had in 2019 where he talked about the pleasure of changing your mind, right? Like and he said it was a form of political happiness, like, oh, I can think differently, right? I can think something else. And David's conviction that our minds could be changed, that our society could be changed, you know, was empirically based in his work as an anthropologist. And just, you know, he was a curious person, right? So he was aware that human societies' value systems can vary wildly across space, across time. And that very often the stories we tell ourselves or the stories we're told about the way things are just aren't true. That all of these arrangements, all of these social arrangements, political arrangements can be transformed, right? But here's the last thing the point I want to make home is that David knew that you can't change those things alone, right? So you can write a brilliant best-selling book like Debt, which expands readers' minds, but really that's no substitute for social movements, for collectivities, for rebellions, for riots. And when David was in that mode of being an activist, he had this extraordinary humility. He was a peer among his equals. And I think he seemed the most happy to me just sitting in a meeting, you know, in a church basement. And I really respected him for that, just how much he embodied his principles in those spaces. He despised affectation and abhorred hierarchy, even one that would put him at the top. So David may not be with us in person anymore, but his perspective remains extremely vital. His insistence on seeing things differently, on siding with the underdogs, on engaging people as an equal, on challenging the pompous and the powerful, finding joy, and keeping that utopian horizon in sight. So I think we need to channel David's astonishing and heartfelt faith in his fellow human beings and refuse to lose sight of the possibility, not necessarily inevitability, of our collective liberation. So thank you for having me. And thank you, David. You wouldn't like us to owe you a debt, but definitely if we can pay it back, it's by continuing the struggle that you're a part of.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Astra. Can I ask Anton Newcomb to speak next? And also, Anton, you're tilted that way around. I don't know if you can turn yourself around. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Nikki, for bringing everybody together and continuing to honor David's work and keep some of those bonds between people that knew him and his work alive. I think it's very admirable. It's really interesting that this falls on 10 years of Occupy and also the fall equinox. You know, it's like a harvest time and the time things start to die, but also on the other side of the hemisphere of that, it's springtime and you got all this life going on. And I would just like to talk briefly, you know, one of when you think about these Occupy, and the things that people were trying to accomplish. I mean, what little I understand, it's most people involved, I mean, not everybody, would be completely shocked how things have multiplied since those issues have multiplied in these 10 years. I mean, we have individuals publicly now that have almost $1 trillion. You know, and France is arguing with Australia about 90 billion, and Bezos could just burp that out. It wouldn't even faze him. You know, and they're like, oh, this is like a big deal to our economy, you know, and it's just like such a mad world now. But what more importantly is, you know, I see activists and different people I really love, sometimes online. They're so frustrated. We face all these problems, and they kind of like lash out at other people that want to feel like they're doing something or involved in being on the right direction or team, and sort of chastising them, saying, you're not doing anything. You're just like looking at people online. And that's just like this frustration, this outrage, because it's completely overwhelming. So when I think about David's work and I think about him as an individual, the one thing that I really, from the times that I spent with him and talked with him and then just watched him, is how his mental attitude was pretty positive about the things he was dealing with, even when it was really serious, whether it was when he was supporting the fighters in Syria, and it was outrage after outrage and betrayal after betrayal and real serious business and stuff. I just think his positive mental outlook was really helpful, I think. And I think the one thing that you might not be able to grasp all of his academic skills, right? You might not be at the same speed, up to the same speed level as him, maybe processing information or spitting it back out, but you can learn something from that real positivity about what you're doing, you know. And I want to keep reminding myself of that, because it is overwhelming. And like my other friend in America, she gets so mad at everybody, and I just see what happens when you don't have that positivity, because she's so right on. She's so smart. She's just like sharp as a tack, but she's 100% angry. And it's justified, right? But maybe it's not the best thing, because really inside this person is somebody who really does want to see change, you know? So I hope that I'm looking forward to listening to everybody, and I'm really super thankful that we all are taking a minute to honor his life and each other. And thank you.
Thank you, Anton. As Nika's just said in the chat, we need the joy. I think that's completely right. Could we have Steve Keen? Dana, can you unmute Steve and spotlight him? Sorry, Steve, 1 second. Dana, can you unmute Steve?
That should be right now. Is that correct?
Brilliant. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm not used to being preceded by speeches that make me think I'm not going to do as well, but that's already happened 3 times. It's something which you have to be both personal and analytical about David. I wrote a bit of the speech. I'm going to ramble around parts of it because there's obviously is far more. Well, no, it's much a personal thing as it is intellectual. This is a person we all admired and loved, and his loss was very hard to take. And I wrote, I managed to escape COVID by traveling to Thailand from the UK and the Netherlands when I saw what a disastrous job they were doing, which was a very good decision last year and not so crash hot this year, but still, I think I've come out ahead. And therefore I evaded the worst of 2020. And I was effectively being a spectator. And then I'm sorry. Then I was in a chat with some mathematics colleagues pulling apart the garbage that passes for neoclassical economics' analysis of climate change. And I suddenly saw a message, I think from Stacey Herbert, saying that David had died. And I was just in shock. And I wrote later that this was like 2020 saying, you think you managed to avoid this? Well, no, you didn't. Here's your dose of 2020. So it was very shocking and a great loss, both intellectually and personally. Now, I want to go to why David was so important to me intellectually. And that is that economics tries to pretend that it's the hard science of the social sciences, and it basically rubbishes anthropology. But if you learn economics as well as I have, you know it's built on myths. They disguise it with what appears to be mathematics to people who aren't trained in mathematics. But it's so bad when you take a look at it, they actually call it mythematics, not mathematics. And in that sense, anthropology in David's hands was the true hard science of the social sciences, because you actually looked at and reacted to the evidence. And I want to work with my favorite part of what I call the Book of Debt. So bear with me if I go a bit too long here, but this is some extracts from David's discussions of the myth of barter in mainstream economics. He says, the economy is where we indulge in our natural propensity to truck and barter. And we're still trucking and bartering. We always will be. Money is simply the most efficient means. In Madagascar, I, David, had the privilege of interviewing Kalanoro, a tiny ghostly creature that a local spirit medium claimed to keep hidden away in a chest at home. But all it wanted to talk about was money. I finally asked, so what did you use for money back in ancient times when you were still alive? The mysterious voice immediately replied, no, we didn't use money. In ancient times, we used to barter commodities directly, one for the other. And David says the story's everywhere, even in Madagascar. People can't imagine any other way that money might have come about. But he said the problem is there's no evidence that it ever happened, and an enormous amount of evidence that it never did. For centuries, explorers have been trying to find this fabled land of barter, none with success. And the economists, on the other hand, live with their myths. So Adam Smith made a myth about Aboriginal North America. And by the middle of the 18th century, pardon me, Lewis Morgan's description of life in the Iroquois was available, and that made it clear that the main institution were longhouses where goods were allocated by women's councils, and no one ever traded arrowheads for slabs of meat. Economists simply ignored this information. He said Jevons, who was one of the founders of neoclassical economics, took his examples straight from Smith, with Indians swapping venison for elk and beaver hides, and made no use of actual descriptions of Indian life that made it clear that Smith had simply made this up. Now, I wish that David was only talking effectively about classical economics and 250 years ago, but the same nonsense is alive on steroids today. And I'll just give you an idea of that from a paper I've just been pulling apart that allegedly was economists estimating what would be the impact of all the major tipping points in the climate being tipped. So Arctic summer sea ice gone, Greenland gone, West Antarctic gone, AMOC gone, no more Gulf Stream keeping the UK warm and Europe warm. Even the permafrost gone and methyl hydrates disappeared. They said that would cause a 1.4% fall in GDP compared to what would have been in the complete absence of climate change. Now, how did they get that nonsense conclusion? Part of it was assuming that damages were simply the square of time. So of temperature increase. So 2 degrees was 4 times as bad as 1, and 3 degrees was 9 times as bad. Now that's rising, but it's very, very gradual. And they multiplied by a parameter, which made it not t squared, but 0.00227 times t squared, meaning 10 degrees of increase would only add 8. So what David identified, the myths they live with, the myths they continue to, are still there, and we should honour David by getting rid of neoclassical economics.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steve. I mean, we really, really should. Next is Molly Crabapple there.
Yes, I'm here.
Cool. I'm just trying to pin you. Oh yeah, here we go. Great. Molly, you've got the floor.
Thank you so much, Nika, for inviting me to be here. And I want to say what an honor it is to talk about David, someone who was a constant inspiration to me and a constant inspiration to all of us. So many people have said so many brilliant things about his work with Occupy, about his intellectual contributions, about the fierce solidarity that he always had with anyone who is an underdog, anyone who is being unjustly attacked. That I want to talk about two other qualities about him. I want to talk about David's generosity, and I want to talk about his sense of mischief. David was one of the most profoundly generous people I've ever met. And I mean this in multiple ways. You have this guy who's like this super genius intellectual, anthropologist, economist, who wrote in a way that allowed any reader, whether or not they had ever been to school, whether or not they had ever gotten some fancy degree or ever, been in some elite circle, any reader could see themselves and could see their problems in his work. I have friends who worked at call centers who, after they read Bullshit Jobs, they suddenly found someone expressing the sort of visceral dread they felt going into work every day and wasting the precious irreplaceable moments of their lives. When I think about his generosity too, I think about this time that I hung out with David on Portobello Road. He loved, antique shopping, as Astra said. And when he walked those streets, he was friends with every single type of people, like every single, working class guy at a stall, David knew and David shared a story with. And I remember there was this book, this copy of the Arabian Nights that I loved, and I was too broke to buy. And he just bought it for me, like out of the blue, because he liked giving gifts. He liked giving gifts. He liked getting gifts. He liked that capacity to feel joy and wonder at the world in this most unexpected ways. Now, when I think about David's sense of mischief, right? Here was this, eminent man who had this like smile, like this dorky little boy who was seeing all of the ridiculousness of the world, all of the pomposity, all of the silliness, all of the terribleness that didn't need to be there. And he was just kind of laughing at it. And he was saying, haha, I am smart and I can see my way out of this bullshit trap that we've woven ourselves into. And there's something better and more beautiful that we can have. I think about that sense of mischief when he invited me to this squat once in London that had a big sign in it that was like, no cops and no journalists. And I was a journalist. and I remember telling him that and him just laughing, that just laugh at the absurdity of everything. I think about David's willingness to pick a fight in the cause of justice, but never be embittered or doctrinaire by it. To always keep in mind these possibilities for a better world and to deal with everyone with this remarkable openness that inspired people to be their best selves. The world is smaller for David's loss. It is smaller, it is a loss to us all. And there's no consolation really in that, except that I think that we need to try to live in those ways that he so embodied best. That sense of questioning all of the pompous bastards, that sense of mischief and of laughter, and that wild, wide open generosity and that greed for life in its every aspect. And that's what I take from David. That's one of the many reasons I'm so happy and so lucky to have known him. And that is what I hope to embody in my own life in tribute to him. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much, all of you guys.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. Next, can we hear from David Graeber, please?
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks, James, for moderating this conversation. Last year, we at Steirische Herbst Festival invited David and Nika to participate with a strange new hybrid format they were working on together in pandemic times, that of the visual assembly. Over the next months, I shared some of the weird lockdown with David and with Nika, and we imagined what this project would be like. The idea was to use structural institutional visualization tools to rethink somehow even from the ground up healthcare at the time when the crisis in care was overwhelmingly clear. And this assembly, which Nika was now trying to carry out in Madrid, was planned for October 11, and it didn't happen for obvious reasons. So instead, the festival helped to organize the memorial carnival held on that day, where we were providing this constant video stream that I was then overseeing. And this was a really intense experience, and one that this Zoom maybe recaptures a little bit. The spirit of this is very much like that, and I'm really glad to be part of it. I guess responding to what Nika sent a little in advance and thinking about, tools to fight against fascism today, the one thing that I wanted to mention that stuck in my mind while reading David's work before I ever had met him or spoken to him came from the Debt book, the Book of Debt, as Steve Keen just said. The section in question is one about communism. And David points out that much of our thinking about communism is purely mythical. So this actually ties into the mythematics point that that Steve was making. I quote, once upon a time, humans held all things in common in the Garden of Eden during the golden age of Saturn in Paleolithic hunter-gatherer bands. Then came the fall, as the result of which we are now cursed with divisions of power and private property. The dream was that someday, with the advance of technology and general prosperity, with social revolutions or the guidance of the party, we would finally be in a position to put things back, to restore common ownership and common management of collective resources. David points out that this is a story we like to tell ourselves. This is a myth, and that it's already done enormous damage, not only an enormous amount of good. And you can only agree, without even launching into a critique of Sorel or of Rosenberg or of the myths of the 20th century worth dying for and so on. Communism is not a fantastic failed epic of ghosts and zombies ready to rise from the thereafter. Instead, he argues in the book, and I continue to quote, it's something that exists right now, something that exists to some degree in any human society, although there has never been one in which anything has been organized in that way, and it would be difficult to imagine how there could be. All of us act like communists a good deal of the time. None of us act like communists consistently. So he calls this actually a kind of baseline communism, a bedrock of actually existing communism that's the foundation for all human sociability. One always behaves, he writes, in a spirit of solidarity, though, this is the problem, more with some people than others. And this means in turn that groups define themselves by commonly held property and sharing within the group, and that conflicts between groups or hostility to strangers or departures from this baseline, ruptures in actually something that's maybe even an eternal and unquestioned basic morality. So when hospitality becomes hostility, that's when this rupture occurs, he remarks somewhere in that section, very finely noting the etymological connection between the two words. I was really impressed, I remember, when I read this, because I thought, this is really like Marx and species being of humanity. And, you can really understand that actually communism is not something fantastic or utopian. It's here in the here and now. And it's something that can be grasped, especially, he notes in that section, in moments of tragedy, catastrophe, or grief. This is when strangers suddenly become sisters and brothers, pulling together somehow to make life continue. I don't want to say that only emergencies can prompt solidarity. Quite on the contrary, what made David's loss so irreplaceable is really that he was one of the few people on the left today who saw that baseline all the time in every situation. At least that was my feeling from reading him. Had he lived, I'm convinced that he would have further tapped into the extraordinary potential of a sociology describing everyday communism that's potential in our lives. So thanks for having me, and I'm sorry if this has gone on too long.
Oh, David, that was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love how David Graeber would talk about the communism everyday life. The pass me the wrench, or can I have a light? I mean, it's as soon as you hear that, it just makes perfect sense. Thank you. So next we're going to have, please, Renee, who's an artist and a friend of David's. I'm asking to unmute. And...
Hi. 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 Okay.
I just wanted to take some photos. Yes. So I just wait here? Okay.
Somebody else is speaking, I guess.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay. Well, sorry, I'm just turning the camera on the other way. I'm actually in a town in Armenia, a place where just about a year ago, not far from here in Artsakh, kind of an autonomous Armenian community in the late Soviet period basically wanted to secede from the Azeri SSR. And they didn't recognize that kind of plebiscites and self-determination, and a war ensued in the early 90s during the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And yeah, thinking about the ghosts of communism and connecting it to somehow this struggle of communities to sort of determine their own fate. And it's interesting to think about Chiapas in the early 90s, 94, and thinking about this struggle that happened within the Soviet Union and the difficulty in a way to find a language within a left, especially in the context of a dissolving kind of union, let's say, of around communism. And this last fall, then there was an invasion. Azerbaijan went to inside this space, and there's a lot of dead young people. Actually, you know, if you see it on that building, there's actually an image of I didn't plan this, but one of the young people from this town that was killed. About 4,000 people have died from that invasion. I mean, and that would be like comparable to maybe like 400,000 Americans in the context of population. But instead of, you know, the 44 days, you know, it took the US, I don't know, 2,000 soldiers of over 20 years. And we see how, you know, the US commemorates that death. But I think David, for me, is a comrade that tried to kind of think that impossible kind of space of thinking the sort of reconciling leftist history with all the kind of limits and blind spots and basically the reinvention of a different politics, maybe a sense of politics. And that's a very precious kind of loss, I feel. You know, the 1 year passing is a very difficult thing in the Armenian context, that it's highly commemorated. So this month is going to be heavy with a lot of commemorations marking 1 year of a lot of young people who died, especially from this region that we're in. But I you know, I was thinking today how to kind of reconcile this kind of the lives of people who get lost, who have no recognition, and then friends like David who everybody remembers. And it's a difficult thing, you know. So, but I wanted to just say, David seemed, from what everyone has also said, was this person who, despite his exceptionality, he was also an everyman, you know, and that special quality to be, yeah, just involved in everything, in the details of thinking and being with others, and fully present.
Video camera launch.
Yeah. It makes sense to have someone talking at the same time right now. I didn't prepare anything like that to speak. I just wanted to be present to where I would be today, and that's where I am. And I wish David was still with us, But I think if there's something that we can kind of keep alive, is this kind of search that really confronts even the dead ends of whatever has been left, and still claims some affinity to that struggle towards a different way of life and a different conception of living together. So we miss you, David, but you're here with us, actually. So that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Could we have Katerina, please?
Do you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm from the same festival Steirische Herbst David Reeve mentioned. We had to make a project last year. It did not happen. And for me, David Graeber, whose work I knew before and we talked before, will always remain an unrealized project, a kind of debt to pay in that positive sense he pointed out to. So that makes us richer. So what this debt is about for me? To always see the big picture of the world, which means to see how wrong is actually, how horribly wrong is the path taken since 1960s, as he writes, by nation states and us lured to it, by both left and right sometimes. We are coerced in a world of perverse dialectics, or as David Graeber once wrote, bizarre sadomasochistic dialectics, where like today, it's hard to tell, is it already coercive political control or still rational hygienic measures? Is it social responsibility or anxiolytic paranoia? Is it progressive support of the local and vernacular? Or is it already, is it fighting progressive support of the local and vernacular fighting big corporations, or is it already parochial ressentiment where fascist typically and happily grows? And it's of a certain significance in an Austrian province where I live and work now. Is it growing awareness of surveillance capitalism? Or are these irrational conspiracy theories invading now left as well as right? Is it that more voices are now heard? Or are we living in the world where emotions are put in the center of jurisdictions? Is it more justice in our world? Or is it that all sorts of conflicts are being moralized and legalized now? Is it that we are open to different point of views, or any sort of ideological and intellectual miscegenation, and I know which word I'm using, is severely punished, especially if we touch upon what is not ours by birth and race right? David Graeber is the one to look for answers here. He's the one to read, and I can only recommend him as a feel-good reading, like literally. He's the one who always shows the lights in the tunnel. And for me, in my field, in arts field, he actually helps me to try to avoid what I would call, inspired by him, bullshit art. Art in 20th century was aiming at escaping the market and was successful in it, in creation of many non-market forms like performance, now of course commercialized. But what happened on the way, that art insisted vehemently, theoretically, and in activist way that this is actually work with a wage instead of a production of consumer good. And that led art, I think, into a trap of being an element of state or corporate production machine. It's like bullshit jobs, where art becomes a PR management of social issues of sorts. So non-bullshit art would be not about being useful, but about being art, about being fictitious and funny and accessible, and for everyone and relevant. So David Graeber always insisted we should never forget the notion of play. And this is what is actually very stimulating for me. And with this, I want to send greetings as well to the Church of StopShopping, to Billy, to Savitri, to all who just have been with us at our festival at Steirische Herbst. Thank you very much to Graeber, to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ekaterina. Can I ask Andres Brinkmanis to speak next?
Yes, hello everybody, and it's very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I will just start with a very brief story because I've never known David in person, sadly, and it was René's call. René Gabri called me up last year in Venice, where I live, and of course it was already after the sad event. And yeah, sadly, my relationship, so to say, starts with that event, and it starts with René asking me to help Nika, actually. And it was very strange because I just went out on the street and I tried to SMS Nika, and she didn't reply immediately because she was busy and probably under shock. And then all of a sudden, on a street next to my house, I just happened to stumble upon a person, and I stopped and I heard her speaking Russian, and I thought, this is Nika, and then I just spoke to her, and it was her with her kids sitting in one restaurant next to my house, and actually, quietly talking, and so that's how we met, without even using the mobile phones. And after that, of course, I tried to help with the translation. So, the meeting with David happened in this very, very strange way. In some of the offices where I was trying to translate, and where I had to translate something which I would rather avoid, prefer not to know at all, or not to have. Like, it was not really a very pleasant thing to translate. So, and ever after, even though we stayed in touch, of course, with Nika, and I'm very grateful because she kind of invited me to be part of this enormous community here, so. We have participated as curators here at the Museum of Care, and I hope we will be able to collaborate. And even though I have never known David in person, I'm very happy that we can contribute with my students. And I personally have tried to contribute as much as possible throughout this very bizarre year. So. I'm very thankful, and I hope we'll be able to continue this collaboration. I just, to conclude, wanted to read a very, very brief phrase from David's book, The Anarchist Anthology, and he's speaking about what is revolutionary action. And he's suggesting that revolutionary action is any collective action which rejects and therefore confronts some form of power or domination, and in doing so reconstitutes social relationships even with the collectivity in that light. Revolutionary action does not necessarily have to aim to topple governments, attempts to create autonomous communities in the face of power. Would, for instance, be almost by definition revolutionary acts, and history shows us that the continual accumulation of such acts can change almost everything. So for me, rather than to think in abstract about what could be such acts, like my time and my involvement in this, and continuing to spread David's thought and being involved in this community and being able to contribute is something quite concrete that I'm doing whenever I can, and I hope this can also contribute to something that we can sort of create collectively, and then through that perhaps create a change that sooner or later will occur on a greater level. Thank you.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you so much. We've just got about 3 more speakers in this section before we open it up to the more fluid discussion, which Jamie and Maria will be facilitating. Next, can we get Jacques from the Yes Men, please?
Hello. It's such an honor to be invited to talk about David. in his honor. And a number of people have already spoken about his spirit of collaboration and how he embodied that spirit in Occupy Wall Street, and where I met him, and several people did, and other times, and how much he believed in collaboration and how generous he was. And I'd like to read a quote from his forthcoming book, The Dawn of Everything, that that talks about that, which David exemplified, collaboration, cooperation, and generosity. And the way he backs it up over page after page after page shows in the rest of the book, I think shows his precise mind, and the way in his hands anthropology truly does become the most exact social science. And I think it gives me the feeling that left-wing movements can achieve marvels in a world that sometimes seems overwhelmingly negative. So here's the quote. What's meant by a self-conscious political actor is what this is about. Neuroscientists tell us we spend the overwhelming majority of our time effectively on autopilot, working out habitual forms of behavior without any sort of conscious reflection. When we're capable of self-awareness, it's usually for very brief periods of time. The window of consciousness during which we can hold a thought or work out a problem tends to be, on average, roughly 7 seconds. What neuroscientists, and it must be said, most contemporary philosophers almost never notice, however, is that the great exception to this is when we're talking to someone else. In conversation, we can hold thoughts and reflect on problems, sometimes for hours on end. This is, of course, why so often, even if we're trying to figure out something by ourselves, we imagine arguing with or explaining it to someone else. Human thought is inherently dialogic. Ancient philosophers tended to be keenly aware of all this. That's why, whether they were in China, India, or Greece, they tended to write their books in the form of dialogues. Humans were only fully self-conscious when arguing with one another, trying to sway each other's views, or working out a common problem. True individual self-consciousness, meanwhile, was imagined as something that only a few wise sages could perhaps achieve through long study, exercise, discipline, and meditation. What we now call political consciousness was always assumed to come first. In this sense, the Western philosophical tradition has taken a rather unusual direction over the last few centuries. Around the same time as it abandoned dialogue as its typical mode of writing, it also began imagining the isolated, rational, self-conscious individual, not as a rare achievement, something typically accomplished, if at all, after literally years of living isolated in a cave or monastic cell or on top of a pillar in a desert somewhere, but as the normal default state of human beings anywhere, which I guess economists would recognize as the rational actor that's completely mythological. Even stranger, over the course of the 18th and 19th centuries, it was political self-consciousness that European philosophers came to see as some kind of amazing historical achievement, as a phenomenon which only really became possible with the Enlightenment itself and the subsequent American and French revolutions. Before that, it was assumed people blindly followed traditions or what they assumed to be the will of God. Even when peasants or popular rebels did rise up to try to overthrow oppressive regimes, they couldn't admit that they were doing so, but convinced their own selves that they were restoring ancient customs or acting on some kind of divine inspiration. To Victorian intellectuals, the notion of people self-consciously imagining a social order more to their liking and then trying to bring it into being was simply not applicable before the modern age. And then he goes on to describe how indeed rich the history of people coming up with new social orders is, and it's just, I think it's a beautiful passage and a beautiful book, and embodies the kind of thought that he, or expresses the kind of thought that he embodied, the generosity, and I'm so glad to still have him with us in many ways, and I feel his presence every time I feel hopeful. So thanks, David.
Thank you, Jack. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Every time there is hope, David is there. Can we have Haveen, please?
Yes, hello, James, and hello, everybody else who have already contributed and will. And thank you, Nika and James, for inviting me to take part in this memorial. We are so honored that we have known David, that he has become a part of us while we have all become a part of him. At the time of David's loss, Nika called me from Venice and I immediately went there. However, I'm unable to be there today in Madrid physically. Today is the first year that our struggles continue without David's physical presence. It is hard to believe a year has gone by without him, but I must say that he has been with us every step of the way. His loss has certainly been untimely for us all that we feel each day. Our commemoration is by way of realizing the desire for a free and equal world of the thousands of people who fell in struggle, including and especially David. If there was one thing about our friend David that stood out, it was his insistence on seeing things differently. He was able to bring things together in absolutely novel ways, and he shed new light to phenomena that we took for granted. His unmatched creativity led him to extend over different disciplines and time periods. And I guess this is where the Kurdish freedom movement and David thought alike and came together. David was a revolutionary and visionary without a doubt, be it in the context of Occupy Wall Street or the revolution in Kurdistan, especially in Rojava. Whenever the oppressed were trying to take things into their own hands and build something new, David was there to support these efforts, whether through theory or through direct action. And while doing this, he took on the world, and if need be, the whole left. This could be seen in his different way of approaching the Kurdish people. More than 6 years ago, David said for the Rojava revolution, no, this is a genuine revolution. And he entered into indirect dialogues with Abdullah Öcalan through his essay on the political philosophy of Öcalan. In his essay, he said, academics are not only expected to avoid engagement with politics, one form this takes is the refusal to believe that anyone who has taken any sort of effective political action in the world can also make important contributions to human thought. At best, they can be an object of analysis. They cannot be seen as engaging as equals in the development of ideas. It is hardly surprising then that contemporary intellectuals, for the most part, have no idea what to do with the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan. David was the kind of activist, revolutionary intellectual that our world urgently needs. He not only had a kind heart, but a sound intellect. And he was still able to resist the academic world's uniformity and to take on issues that may not have been popular. Raima and I began to know David since 2012, when he came to talk about debt in Germany. That had so much in common with Öcalan writings, we just had to meet him. And our interaction became more profound as we visited Rojava together, in the conferences of challenging capitalist modernity in Hamburg, other seminars in the UK, and our discussions for Museum of Care. Earlier in 2018, we were there where you are right now in Madrid, together with Nazan and Andre, to talk about the revolutionary ideas of the Kurdish freedom movement. There, we also visited a museum that exhibited the struggle against fascism. David was very proud of his father for his solidarity and struggle against fascism in Spain. David continued the tradition. He was part of and supported radical movements that changed our lives for the better. Kurds, Arabs, Assyrians, Armenians, and other peoples in the regions have demonstrated that the only way out of the existing quagmire is solidarity and the freedom of women and of peoples. The freedom of one is the freedom of the other. They have dealt a heavy blow to the dark ages and fascism that ISIS, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and the Turkish state, among others, hope to unleash in the Middle East. In the process, they have shown the possibility of a path out of the crisis to another, a brighter future based on women's freedom, an ecological economy, and a democratic society, inspiring and giving hope to millions around the world. David had yet much to contribute at this critical juncture of human history. Because he was a brilliant anthropologist, intellectual, anarchist activist, a friend of the revolution in Kurdistan, and an important person with unique capacities for producing meaning. He is missed by all of us. But I have to say, David lives on in our struggles in Kurdistan and wherever there is free human spirit. I thank you for this time. And as I said, he will live on with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haveen. Now we're going to turn to our last speaker in this section. So we'll have Debbie Bookchin, and after she speaks, we'll go to Madrid and to the Zapatistas and Nika before we have the open mic session. So Debbie, if you could unmute.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you, Nika, and thank you everybody who's spoken and who is still to speak so eloquently about David. You know, David used to say that anarchism was not his identity, but rather something he did. And that simple description really described his approach to life. So many people have also already spoken about his remarkable playful personality, and he was that rare academic who believed that ideas were not just for contemplating in an ivory tower, but that they found their truest meaning when put into practice. Unlike so many others in the academy who are increasingly narrowed in their scope of what they can consider because of the nature of academic specialization, David was never subject to the cant of the university. He had a brilliant and plastic mind. He ranged far and wide in synthesizing ideas. And the ideas were really for him the basis of building a new enchanted life in which we could all be free and equal. So I want to focus for a moment on one of the areas that he and I worked particularly closely together on, Rojava, and why he thought it was so important that those of us living in the West not only pay close attention to the radically democratic project there, but support it with every ounce of energy we could summon. As an anthropologist, David had a particularly keen understanding of how special the multi-ethnic egalitarian society being built in Rojava really is, especially with regard to women's liberation and the fact that in Rojava, women really do play an equal role in running every aspect of society, from the political to the economic to the social. As an activist, he knew how much education, patience, and understanding it takes to really put the ideals of direct democracy into practice. Just as anarchism is not something you simply believe in, but rather something that you do, David believed that as activists, we must actively support our sisters and brothers around the world as they struggle to bring new worlds into being. His father, Kenneth, fought for the Republic in the Spanish Revolution of 1936. David was so proud of his father's activism, and it was an example that David lived by, as witnessed by his close relationship to Rojava, which he not only visited more than once, but also wrote about continuously. That spirit of internationalism that so infused David's thinking is unfortunately disappearing from great parts of the left today. We've narrowed our interests so much that the vision of a worldwide united working class, what we might perhaps in David's words call a united 99%, that animated the internationalism of socialist and anarchist movements of the past, it's been forgotten by many on the left, especially in the United States, the country of David's birth. Elements of the left are so preoccupied with the West's history of imperialism that they've lost the forest for the trees and failed to see that in Syria, for example, the presence of a small number of American troops, far from being imperialist, is preventing a much more threatening imperialist power, that of Turkey, from crushing the most important project in self-governance of this century, the Kurdish-led autonomous administration of North and East Syria, also known, of course, as Rojava. In the United States, the situation is so serious that a new elected so-called progressive to the United States Congress, Jamal Bowman, has introduced a resolution to remove the few hundred American troops remaining in Syria, as some of you may have seen in recent news reports. This is a move that would benefit two people, Russia's Vladimir Putin, who is actively trying to gain hegemony in the region, and the authoritarian Turkish ruler, Erdogan, who is profoundly threatened, of course, by the egalitarian women-led society of Rojava just across the border from his Turkey. The fact that Bowman has received campaign donations from 8 members of the Turkish American National Steering Committee makes this legislation even more egregious. If David were alive today, I know he would be urging all of us to do everything we can to make our voices heard in opposition to this dangerous, reactionary, and unnuanced approach to foreign policy. As he said many times to me, we have in Rojava, as with the Zapatistas in Chiapas, a living, breathing hope for a better future for all of us. If we don't care deeply, as David and his father Kenneth did, about our brothers and sisters in far-off lands who are fighting for the same values as we are, then we are not really the left libertarians that we think of ourselves as in the true tradition of international solidarity that these movements are supposed to embody. It's time for us to carry David's values forward in our everyday lives, to actively stand with the people of Rojava and everywhere who need our help, but in this case, by pressing our leaders to curb Turkey's aggression and to give this region the political recognition it deserves and a seat at the negotiating table on the future of Syria. Do it to honor David's memory. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because if we do not, we potentially lose one of the very few models we have today of a non-sectarian, left libertarian society, one that offers the inspiration that we all desperately need to keep pushing forward with our own dreams of a better world. Do it because David isn't here to do it for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And I think that's an absolutely wonderful way to conclude this bit of the day's celebrations and the day's assembly. And in light of what Debbie said about the need to have an internationalist perspective, I think it's fitting that we're handing back over now to our friends in Madrid and our Zapatista friends who are there as well. And I hand it over back to Nika. You need to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, so I think this is actually the two organizers of the event. So now we have an art part. And then I just, Clive Russell, who is the author of the Extinction Rebellion design, one of the authors, and my partner for the visual assembly that didn't happen, will speak after that.
Hey,
So-
hi. Hi, so many friends here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all that you said and shared and taught us today. I'm Savitri. I live in New York City. I'm proud to call it my hometown. It was David's hometown, and we were lucky to see him when he came through. He really does make us proud to be New Yorkers, I think, and operated from that position so much. We're going to sing a song that was written by the General Assembly, the writing group of the General Assembly at Occupy Wall Street. It's the opening statement of that document created at Occupy Wall Street. And this is for you, David. We miss you. We miss seeing you at meetings. We always have a chair for you at every meeting. You made us laugh. You made it easier to be there. You made it easier to go in the street. And you explained what we were doing to us in a way we never understood. So. To the people of the world. The world, the people of the world, the people of the world, to the people of the world, to the people of the world. We, the New York City General Assembly, occupy Wall Street in Liberty Square, urge you to assert your power. Exercise your right to peaceably assemble, occupy public space. Create a process to address the problems we face and generate solutions. Accessible to everyone, to all communities that take action and form groups in the spirit of direct democracy. We offer support, documentation, and all other resources at our disposal. To the people of the world, to the people of the world, people of the world, people of the world, people of the world, occupy, shut it down. New York City is the people's town. Occupy, shut it down. New York City is the people's town. Occupy, shut it down. New York City is the people's town. Occupy, shut it down. Money is the people's town.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. What's the question?
Slide.
A
I
fly.
have to put on slide. Are you there?
Where is it?
CLLIE, right? Russell? And then I send it to Jenny. Then we start.
Yeah, Nika. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone in Spain. Hello, all the amazing people who've just been speaking. And hello, all the people who are following this amazing event. We've got one very special speaker who's going to open up this section of this, what is it, an adventure. This section of the adventure, all right, we'll go into, it's Occupy, folks, so we're gonna start talking with each other, obviously. It's all about hearing everyone's voices, and we're gonna have someone give a talk first before we go off with that. But before then, just one more massive thank you to all the people who were speaking. There was some lovely stuff that was said right from the beginning. The gentleman speaking from Chiapas, who was talking about word as flower, and that's what we leave. And then so many of you were quoting David's flowers. There's a field of flowers out there that he's left for everybody, and it was a brilliant thing to hear. And the other thing that came through from everybody was humility and joy. Humility is such a prerequisite for being handy. And everyone who knows David knows that he had such deep humility. And Astra described David bringing her down to Occupy and showing her around with such joy. And I remember showing him around the pink boat of Extinction Rebellion. When I met Nika first, she was there. Same joy. He was like a kid in a candy shop, okay? Joy is so important, and that man had it in spades. Okay, now with humility and occupy, all right, with humility and occupy, we have another great gentleman here, Billy, who is going to be part of the procedures later. But when he arrived in Occupy London, the great Billy, Reverend Billy, when he arrived in Occupy London, he said, right, where's the kitchen? He came straight from prison, the Boneyard in New York, flew over here, went straight to St. Paul's Cathedral. We welcomed him and he was very gracious, just him on his own with his knapsack. And he said, right, where's the kitchen? And we all thought he was hungry. He went straight to the kitchen, put all his stuff down and did washing up for 3 hours. That was his entry to the camp. Now that sounds tiny, but it says everything because humility is everything. All right, so it's a real pleasure to be inviting to speak before we open up this next section, Laura, who we very rarely hear from, but who is the stronger shadow partner of Jeremy himself. So Laura, would you like to take the microphone and please give your memories of David and what message that you want to pass on? Are you there?
Yes. Thank you, Jamie. And thank you, Nika. It is a great honor that you invite me to speak, to say a few words about David. So, as I say, there is so much I could say about David, but I can think of no one better than him. So let's hear in his words about an event he felt passionately about, and that is even more important today. The Corriton blockade was inspired by a call from indigenous groups in South America. Climate
to say a few words about David. So
I think that echo is finished, Laura. Try again.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. The Corriton blockade was inspired by a call for indigenous groups in South America tied to the Climate Justice Action Network, a new global network created in the lead of the actions in Copenhagen in December 2009 for a kind of anti-Columbus Day in honor and defense of the earth. Yet it was carried out in the shadow of a much anticipated announcement later: the cuts to the tattered remains of the British welfare state, from benefits to education, threatening to throw hundreds of thousands into unemployment and thousands already unemployed into destitution, the largest such cut since before the Great Depression. The great question on everyone's mind was, will be there a cataclysmic reaction? Even worse, was there any possibility there might not be? In France, it has already begun. French climate camps had long begun planning a similar blockade at the Total refinery across the Channel in Le Havre. When they arrived in the 16th, they discovered the refinery already occupied by its workers as part of a nationwide pension dispute that had already shut down 16 of France's 17 oil refineries. The police reaction was revealing. As soon as the environmental activists appeared, the police leaped into action, forcing the strikes back into the refinery and establishing a cordon in an effort to ensure that under no conditions should the activists be able to break through and speak with the patrolling workers. After hours of effort, a few of cyclists did eventually manage to break through. Just over a decade ago, he wrote, "Environmental justice won't happen without social justice." As world leaders prepare to gather in Glasgow next month for COP26, we should remember and act in David's words. Let's remember that justice and equality go hand in hand with caring for our Mother Earth and our people. Let's do it for the great David. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura, very much. I'm going to pass over to. There's been a lot of English being spoken, and we need to kind of keep the fact that that's not the only language in the world. I'm passing over to my co-pilot in this adventure, Maria. Over to you.
Okay, hello everybody. So I'm going to invite the Spanish participants in the square to share their impressions so far. So I'm going to speak in Spanish to invite them, okay, to welcome them, because maybe they don't speak English, all of them. Hola compas, ¿cómo estáis? Nos gustaría saber, tener un feedback de vosotras, veros y saber cómo estáis, cómo está cayendo esto, el panel, todos los que han participado ya han hecho un homenaje a David Graeber. Y bueno, y después empezaremos por el Zoom también a preguntaros, pero primero queríamos saber un poco cómo estáis en la plaza. Can you show us the square now, the people, please? If there is some interaction between us. Hola. ¿Alguien quiere decir cómo está siendo su experiencia de toda esta celebración en la plaza, ahí reunidas? Estupendo, se os ve muy bien. Muy bien. Estamos tímidas, nadie quiere hablar. They are shy, I don't see anybody wanting to speak, or maybe Nika is there. Okay, maybe we can continue, I don't know.
We can come back to the square. It's a very colourful square. It looks like a 1970s prog rock album cover at the moment. That's because of Billy. All right, listen, there is a great spokesperson who we haven't heard from, okay? And, you know, the Visual Assembly, there's an amazing moment, right? When Nika and David met the art department of Extinction Rebellion, and it was just like a romance made in rebel heaven. And of course, they've been that art department, you know, the art, let's not forget the aesthetics of Extinction Rebellion was pretty cool, right? I mean, if it was a car, we might even have bought it, for God's sake, but luckily it wasn't. So what was great to watch that whole idea of the kind of museum of care explode visually by them working with Clive and Charlie and Claire, all right? And a lot of this visual assembly that the fascist prognostications of the Madrid legal system has stopped, but the Visual Assembly really emerged once they started talking a lot with Clive, Charlie and Claire from Extinction Rebellion. So I'm now going to welcome to the virtual stage Clive from This Ain't Rock and Roll. And it's that thing about, you're on your mic, Grandad. Grandad, you unmute yourself.
I couldn't find myself. I was looking at you, Jamie, and enjoying what you were saying. I wasn't thinking of myself. So yeah, just to go back on what Jamie was just saying there. I was, you know, amazed to finally meet David and Nika, and we got some valuable advice from them with Extinction Rebellion. It's very difficult to do these things, and you don't do them alone, as lots of people have mentioned earlier today. And having a great mind like David's to sort of lean on was really helpful to us. So, you know, I really miss him, and I know plenty of you here miss him too. But anyway, I'm here to sort of try and explain what we originally intended, which is of course something visual. So me talking about it is going to be pretty pathetic. But originally it was called Madrid Cares. And that's really because we know Madrid cares. But obviously the Madrid authorities didn't care. In fact, the Madrid authorities were careless. And so I think you have a thing in Madrid where you say you still have all the good songs, and we've just heard one from the Reverend Billy, and we may have not won the war to get the Visual Assembly on in Madrid, but we still have all the good songs. And today we can still sing, which is really important. But that's certainly not what we imagined doing. What we imagined was the square at the Reina Sofia, the beautiful square there, filled with fluorescent yellow lines gridding out a sort of makeshift museum, a sort of place where we could place our thoughts. And then we imagined this wonderful group of people that are currently in Madrid, holding an assembly in person, so online and offline, with the wonderful Jamie also sort of conducting an English version online and then also a Spanish version online, with lots of people from all over the world joining us to begin to create something wonderful on the square itself, a sort of crazy, chaotic, joyous painting across the square made of lots of stencils created by artists from all over the world, which we've collected together and we would love you to add to as well. And I'll give you some sort of email addresses. Yes, this comes with a call to action. So, but this isn't the end for the visual assembly, because we are going to do one. And we're going to do a visual assembly, I think, in my hometown of London, because it's easier for us to put it on here. But also doing it in London, we'd also like other people all over the world to self-organize their own visual assemblies as well. And we can help them do this. We can give them the stencils, we can help them with a bit of technology, maybe, but we can certainly connect us all together online. And that's the wonderful thing about being online, is that we can actually connect like we're doing today. And sort of what the point of this assembly will be, we haven't quite decided yet. We don't know what we'll deliberate on, but we will certainly have, hopefully, at least as big an audience as today. Probably not as wonderful an audience, because I think you're all wonderful people. But so to cut to the quick, so we would like you to either contribute the stencil, and you can ask us for the brief at, and I must get this right, so I'll look down very carefully and take off my glasses, we@museum.care. And if you'd like to hold a visual assembly, you can contact us at we@museum.care as well. And please do that. And remember, art can be a weapon, and it can be a weapon against a right-wing media, the surge of laissez-faire capitalism, a weapon against the closure of our public spaces. And in our time, a climate and ecological crisis, art really hasn't ever been as important as it is now. And it's actually no longer good enough to just have the good songs. We need to win the culture war and have the good songs, songs about care and freedom.
Okay, Clive, do you want to into the chat as well?
Yeah,
that's all right.
I'll pop it in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Right, so it's siesta time in Barcelona, right? So people aren't quite up yet to be in the square and joining our colourful 1970s prog rock band who are there, right? So what we're going to do is start off with the assembly, and rather than just having yet again a middle-aged white man telling everyone what to do, I'm going to pass over to Maria to introduce this section, if that's all right, Maria. Yeah.
Okay, so I introduce this section in English or in Spanish? Or both?
Yeah, both. Go on, that's very entertaining. Let's do that. Why not?
Okay, so we are going to invite you to speak about the issue of care, community of care. What does a community of care look like, for example? And we would like to interact both offline and online, if it is possible, with the help of Nika or Savitri, whoever is there in the square. So I don't know which order we can follow now. Jamie, tell me, what do you think?
Nika, go for it, Nika. Come closer to the microphone. Nika, come closer to the mic.
Okay, I think so I wanted this lab who was doing technical stuff and everything can occupy, and we took over here.
Right. Okay, I don't want to completely accurate to say I was doing all the technical stuff during Occupy.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay, but a lot of people don't know.
It's okay.
No, don't touch it. No.
Nice.
The kid they have looks just like the daughter.
You saw them? They're the ones that told you I'm here?
Yeah.
What a drag that you were here and I was just up there.
Can everyone else, if you mute your mics, who are we listening to at the moment, Nico? What's coming from the square?
This is Iceberg.
Great.
You hear me?
Yeah, closer to the mic. Closer to the mic.
Bas, are you going to speak in English or in Spanish?
I'm going to speak in English. I'm actually an American.
Okay.
And I'm here because I'm in exile. I'm going to make sure that we have the right audio. Yeah, with me, guys. No, it's the right audio. Okay, very good.
A bit closer.
I have to be closer to the mic. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I want to talk a little about David. I know David from Occupy. What I was doing in Occupy was I was actually coordinating all the media, a lot of the media. We were doing a lot of the live streams from the square and also all the video stuff and so on. And we're trying to tell the message from the square. We're trying to empower the folks in the square to tell what's going on to the world. And David was obviously one of the people who was doing a lot of the philosophy behind our movement. So the thing about David, which is very interesting, and actually a lot of speakers touched upon this leading up to this, is that a lot of the work David did was not exactly lauded by the establishment, even including some institutions he worked for. For example, the way Yale University got rid of him is a perfect example. So something interesting happened when this event was being planned, or this event came together, because museums of the Queen Sofia of Madrid, which is pretty much like the Spanish state, contacted Nika 6 months ago. Is that correct? You correct me.
No. So
Explain what happened.
Okay, so we contacted museums and our art friends, and they very nicely agreed to help, and they tried to help us for months, like really working and trying to do their best, pay insurance for us, and were really kind, but still we didn't get the permission. We're puzzling why, because
it's not puzzling. Okay, so different opinions.
No, we're puzzling because it was so innocent. What we try to do, and hopefully we will be able to do it in London. But
okay,
yeah, so it's not like.
Right.
But last years, this
no, let's just
there's no permissions in Madrid.
The thing is,
this kind of event.
The issue is that we got to this event, and a few days ago, we found out that the city of Madrid, the government of Madrid, is going to ban chalking on the street. This is why they approved a neo-Nazi parade to the gay neighborhood of Madrid last weekend. So, okay, of course, when I was one of the persons who wrote the whole list and called bullshit, I'm sorry if I offended anyone. But the reality is, it's very interesting actually that Davis Memorial happened here, the physical part of it, happened here today in Madrid of all places. Because Madrid is kind of like, I mean, aside from Hungary maybe, it's like the fascist center of Europe. It is the center of gentrification. I mean, the downtown Madrid is destroyed. The only thing left is tourists carrying bags to the Airbnbs, €1 beers, all the artists are gone. I mean, they're still there, but they're being displaced. And you have this huge gentrification thing, but it's on steroids. And it's basically, and you have this whole Trumpian thing going on, when even like the left-wing neighborhoods are voting for the right wing and so on. And you have this whole ethos of just make more money, blah, 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 blah. But you know, the false capitalism. This is the temple of it. I mean, not this physical space itself. The space was offered by the community, and it's one of the last remaining amazing community gardens in Madrid that we're actually hosting this in. So anyway, the important thing is that this memorial, this government, the fascist government of Madrid, try to ban the memory of David. And we should take that in a sense almost as a victory Because if someone needs to try to ban the memory, that means what he stood for, what he worked for, what he accomplished is actually threatening the model. So I'll say that. Another thing is I'm a New Yorker, and I'm actually here in Spain because, like, as things turned out after Occupy, and as I was doing all this other work related to Black Lives Matter and so on, but US government decided to designate me and my wife as terrorists, and we've had all kinds of crazy adventures, right? And so one of the important things in all of this is solidarity. And it's when I'm going to urge people and think about it for a second, that like when you go through this kind of struggles, when you go through these fights, it's very important when you look next to yourself, your comrades, you can count on them. So I would actually tell people to reflect, and this is why, and this is kind of serious, and this is no joke. You need to be able to count on people who are next to you. And if you can't, if you suddenly find yourself, if you're surrounded by hypocrites or whatever, you have a real problem. So leave it at that. But anyway, David did amazing work. He coined the world, that phrase, we are the 99%, was the ultimate like collection of, a sentiment of unity that united us. So that's like just that by itself, aside from all his ideological work he did, is a huge thing in itself. So I want to salute David. I want to salute all of you who came here today. And who wants to speak next? Reverend?
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Vlad, so much. All right, so we're getting messages from the square about what happens next, and from all of you about what happens next. And what we're going to do is actually enjoy some. Well, you're not going to call this entertainment. Enjoy some inflamement and rapture, courtesy of the very Reverend Billy Talon from the Church of StopShopping, the man who coined the phrase Revoluia, who has been drawing in all of these thoughts and emotions, all of these memories and hopes, and he's going to do what the Reverend does well. Over to you, my friend. Keep it lit.
Jamie, I'm here with my colleague.
Aquí estoy con mi colega que va a hablar en español para mí.
Francisca Benítez.
Hola.
And we're gonna, where are we standing?
Yeah, that's good. Right here so they can hear you. Right there so they can hear you. And we can hold this down. Sorry, it's up your nose. Fran, come over here.
Ready, Fran?
I'm coming.
Here we go.
These people, all these people.
All these people, everybody. From the Church of StopShopping.
De la iglesia para de comprar.
We are on our way to COP26.
Vamos a la COP26.
Which has been mentioned off and on in the course of this memorial to David.
Que se ha mencionado varias veces en este memorial a David.
And there comes a point where you want to ask David just exactly what are we going to do there?
Y llega el momento que hay que preguntarle, David, ¿qué es lo que vamos a hacer ahí?
And talking to David's many friends.
Y hablando con los amigos de David.
It is very easy and powerful and sad and heart-wrenching.
Es fácil y poderoso y te rompe el corazón.
It is very simple to conjure David and suddenly he's standing next to you.
Es posible como buscar a David y que se aparece aquí al lado de nosotros.
His eyes, his face, his voice, his being.
Su voz, su ser.
Very present. And I would ask David,
Yo le quiero preguntar.
This is the 26th climate conference.
Esta es la conferencia del clima número 26.
And that we have had in the world.
Hemos tenido en el mundo.
And they have been time after time after time.
Una y otra vez.
Unsuccessful.
No se llega a ninguna parte al parecer.
Co-opted, overrun.
Tomada.
By the very criminals
por los mismos criminales
that pour the poisons into the atmosphere.
Que ponen todos esos venenos en la atmósfera.
The carbon dioxide, the nitrous oxide, the methane, and what have you. They end up time and time again, and the banks that give them billions of dollars of
Y
credit,
todos los bancos que les dan crédito, ahí están todos.
somehow they end up financing these climate conferences.
Toda esa gente va y financia estas conferencias.
And this is happening again in
Y esto
Glasgow,
pasa de
Scotland.
nuevo, y eso va a pasar de nuevo ahora en Glasgow.
From November 1st to November 12th. I hope that
Desde el 1
all of
de
you
noviembre
come.
al 12. Espero que vengan todos.
So I would say, David, what do you do?
David, ¿qué vamos a hacer?
I believe, now just gathering all the conversations since the 90s.
Yo creo que si juntamos todas las conversaciones que llevamos desde los años 90.
And the books and how the books and how David comes through.
Y cómo David pasa a través.
His friends and his readers and his students and his, as has happened today here in this online memorial. I can hear him saying to me,
lo escucho diciéndome,
how is the power meeting you really?
¿Cómo estás juntándote con el poder? No,
I think that he would say something like, what is the physical experience of the power of these corporations at these conferences?
¿Cuál es la experiencia física del poder de estas corporaciones en estas conferencias?
At least I believe that is one of the things that he would ask that he would ask me. And I believe that suddenly, just imagining him asking me this, I start coming up with an answer I would not have come up with by myself. Amen.
Solo imaginándomelo ya me empiezo a imaginar la respuesta que no se me habría ocurrido de otra manera.
I find myself remembering that these polluting corporations, these oil companies, these plastic companies, these chemical companies, they bombard the conferences.
Todas estas corporaciones bombardean las conferencias.
Before they take place in the weeks running up to the conference.
Antes incluso que empiecen, ya están ahí.
There are advertisements and press releases and reputational consultants and spin doctors, and they are unleashed on everybody that's going to come.
Y toda esa propaganda se le tira a toda la gente que va a venir.
And right now the press releases all promise zero carbon by a particular date, 2040, 2045, 2035, 2050, 2037. They all have zero carbon. It's the zero carbon press release era right now. And it is bullshit. It is pure. It's mathematics. It's an example of bullshit press releases. I think that would be a phrase that David would use. That would be my answer to David. I think that David would say, well, first of all, go there. You're with your community. Go there with the choir. And sing on the streets of Glasgow. The way you sang it, Occupy Wall Street. Go up and down the streets parading. And engage people, pull them into the choir, pull them into the parade. And have a build up a kind of physical power barrier against the presence of all this bullshit. And gradually this work as play, play as work, dancing in the streets, singing, stop shopping. It will start going into the bodies of the people that have to get by you to get to those exclusive conferences that nobody can go to. Starts coming in. It starts coming into their bodies, and it starts radiating. It starts taking over the conference. Just the joy, the singing, the secular religiosity, the environmental love, Mother Earth flowing through us. Amen. Praise be. That will come into the conference. That will come into the conference. Direct democracy is physical. Direct democracy comes from the body.
Revoluia, Revoluia, Reverend Billy. Thank you so much from the Church of StopShopping. Beautiful. So, what we're going to do, look, there's been a lot of talking about, you know, just one voice after another. And Maria is going to introduce what's going to be a small assembly, small breakout assembly. Okay, so online, we're going to be in just small groups. And Maria's going to tell you what's happening and what you're going to be talking about. It's going to be 10, 15 minutes max. Over to you, Star.
Okay, so we are going to do these breakout rooms, and we are going to ask you questions about care and freedom. So how and when did we put care and freedom aside? How do we bring care and freedom back to our lives? How do we bring these values into the movement? How do we make care and freedom part of the movement? So we need someone to make these rooms now. From the technical assistance, someone who is the host of this Zoom assembly, please.
I can do that, Maria, no problem. I love the idea of being technical assistants. It's so exciting. And, one question is, how many people do you wish to have in each room?
5 maximum. We were speaking about this. These are the questions I copy in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, I will create those now.
Thank you.
Thank
John.
you.
Does anyone want to lead the assembly now for 10 minutes?
¿Alguien quiere ser facilitadora o facilitador de la asamblea por los 10 minutos?
Anyone?
¿No hay voluntario? Voluntario, voluntario.
Okay. Okay, so the question is,
La pregunta es,
how do we have freedom in our movement?
¿cómo tenemos libertad dentro de nuestro movimiento?
How do we have care in our movement?
¿Y cómo producimos cuidados en nuestro movimiento?
And how do we cooperate in our movement?
¿Y cómo cooperamos en nuestros movimientos?
Okay, that's the question.
Entonces, si alguien quiere decir algo, dice, yo quiero hablar. Y le habla, y aquí podemos hablarle, tenemos intérpretes móviles.
This is how you ask the question.
Así se pregunta, hace la pregunta.
Maybe it's different here, but this is yes.
Sí. Sí, estoy de acuerdo.
No.
Okay.
Tengo
una respuesta a lo que se está hablando.
Direct response. Okay. They're behind us. Okay, so the questions again. How do we have care? How do we cooperate?
¿Cómo mantenemos libertad? ¿Y cómo hacemos cooperación? ¿Alguien quiere hablar? Compartir algo. Escuchando siempre el contraste de opiniones. Escuchando siempre el contraste de opiniones. Listen all the time to the contrasting opinions. Yes.
Listening to the contrasting opinion. Anyone else?
Having principles.
Having principles. Maybe we practice also the people's mic.
Practiquemos el micrófono humano. ¿Conocen el micrófono humano? No, el micrófono humano es que cuando grita mucho termina con la garganta. Que repite lo que ha dicho. Exacto. So, el micrófono humano consiste, te lo explico en español primero. Cuando no te dejan usar amplificación para tener una asamblea grande con 200 personas, por ejemplo, y no pueden escuchar los que están ahí atrás, se usa el micrófono humano, que es repetir frase por frase lo que dice una persona. Entonces, si le dijera, hola compañeros, aquí estamos todos reunidos. Y si lo seguimos haciendo así, con olas de repetición, podemos llegar hasta la puerta de Alcalá. Y más allá. Ahí lo aprendió, el micrófono humano. Ahí está. You just have learned the human mind.
You just have learned the human mind. Okay, care, cooperation.
Care, cooperation.
How do we do it?
¿Cómo lo hacemos? A ver, Red Bill.
Imagine the other person's
Imagina la otra persona. Imagine the other person.
feelings.
Imagina los sentimientos de la otra persona. Imagina los sentimientos de la otra persona. ¿Cómo se llama eso en español? Creo que empatía, ¿o no? Empatía. Empatía. Empatía.
Being aware that it's not all about you. What?
Siendo consciente de la voz, siendo consciente de que no se trata siempre solo de ti.
Los tenemos que hacer entre nosotras y nosotros, porque de los gobiernos no nos podemos jugar.
Los cuidados los tenemos que hacer entre nosotras y nosotros, porque de los gobiernos no nos podemos fiar. Voy a traducirlo. Care has to happen among each other because we can't trust government.
I have a question.
Yo tengo una pregunta.
How do we learn, how do we care when we don't care?
How do we care when we don't care?
How do we learn to care?
How do we learn to care?
How do we grow care?
How do we grow care?
Hay que, está difícil traducir, porque aquí la palabra care está diciendo como interesarse
¿Cómo aprender a
y cuidar. Claro, que te importe.
¿Cómo lograr que te importe? ¿Cómo aprender a lograr que te importe?
¿Cómo aprender a lograr que te importe?
They're doing another breakout inside Zoom. And then second assembly happening
¿Cómo hacer
here.
crecer
So,
el que te
but
importe?
Revisando y cuestionando principios, ¿sabes?
Revisando y cuestionando principios.
Y cambiarlos si es necesario.
Y cambiarlos si es necesario. Revising and questioning our own principles and changing them sometimes if it's necessary.
Revising and changing our own principles
and changing them if necessary. Collectively. Y los cuidados que siempre han caído sobre las mujeres, que nos los repartamos entre hombres y mujeres. And the caring activities that have historically fell on women, that we should start sharing this caring among genders.
Women, we should start sharing activities.
They all should do that activities as a primary instead of we should all do those activities instead of men. Caring activities and replacing them with, we should replace production and consumption with care.
Replace production and consumption with care and freedom. Deberíamos reemplazar consumismo y producción con cuidados y libertad.
Because we cannot endlessly produce, because we have a limited resources, but we can endlessly care about each other. Because we cannot endlessly produce, because we have limited resources, but we can endlessly care about each other. Wow. That's how we can grow.
And that's how we can grow.
Porque no podemos seguir produciendo y consumiendo porque tenemos recursos limitados. En cambio, el cuidado es completamente ilimitado y podemos seguir cuidando y queriéndonos. Ahora sí, limitado.
compañero.
Remembering that every change, any change has to be good for all. Has to be better for all.
Remembering that it's good for all. Recordar que cualquier cosa tiene que ser buena para todos. Cualquier cambio.
Sí, cualquier cambio que quieras. Yeah, anything that you want to care about has to be better for all. That's how you make them care.
Anything you want to care about has to be better for all. That's how you make them care.
Utilizar transparencia radical cuando un compañero no tiene principios y perjudica a los demás.
Micrófono humano. Utilizar transparencia radical
Cuando hay un compañero que no tiene principios y lo utiliza contra los demás.
To utilize radical transparency when there is a comrade that is not caring about others, is using it against others. Wow. Dale. Y la transparencia radical.
We use the word radical transparency. Radical transparency is used to describe when you're actually exposing.
Radical transparency is used to describe when you're actually exposing
Things people don't want to expose.
things people don't want to expose.
So, the issue with social movements,
Social movements.
our power
Power
comes from the fact that we're actually pure.
comes from the fact
That we're actually pure.
comes from the fact
From our
that we're
ideals.
actually pure from our ideals. From our ideals.
Our power comes from our social movements, our power.
El movimiento social es nuestro poder.
El movimiento social es nuestro poder.
From our idealism, our purity.
De nuestro idealismo
We are purity.
y nuestra pureza
To those ideals.
a esos ideales.
So when you have somebody who's pretending to be something else,
Cuando hay gente que pretende ser alguien que no es,
and then at the same time is acting in a way that's dishonest, in the country to the principles.
pero al mismo tiempo pretende ser alguien, pero después actúa de otra manera,
They discredit the whole movement.
ellos están descreditando el movimiento entero.
So if you want the movement to succeed,
Si tú quieres que el movimiento tenga éxito,
then everybody has to be looking around.
todo el mundo tiene que mirar alrededor.
If somebody's full of shit,
Y si alguien está lleno de mierda, decirlo.
and sometimes it's very uncomfortable
Hay veces que es muy un poco confortable
because there's always problems with social power within that social movement.
porque siempre hay problemas sociales en los movimientos sociales.
The individuals who are very active,
Hay individuos que son muy activos,
they do a lot,
hacen muchísimo,
but something's a little wrong. Maybe.
pero hay veces que hay algo que no cuadra.
It might be money, it might be
A lo
sexual
mejor
thing, it might be whatever.
dinero, sexo o
All these things relate to
contacto,
power.
a todo lo que refiere al poder.
And if we don't look, no, but if we don't catch that,
Si no pillamos eso,
then we become complicit.
nos volvemos cómplices.
And then the whole project goes down.
Y al final el proyecto entero cae, se delegitimaliza.
It's part of the
Okay,
social.
direct response, yeah.
I'm just going to say, so that's all, that's explanation. So radical transparency, you put it all out there.
Eso es transparencia radical, cuando tú hablas por lo que has visto que no corresponde al movimiento social, a los ideales del movimiento social.
Pero, ¿quién decide cuándo es? Who decides?
The asamblea.
The assembly.
The assembly.
When there is a conflict, you'll take.
Yes, you have to, otherwise it becomes cancer.
Anyone in response? Anyone? Gracias por la respuesta y por la explicación.
Gracias por la respuesta y la explicación.
Me parece interesante.
Y muy interesante.
Y también en nuestras relaciones
individuales
y en nuestra vida social.
When you bring it in front of a group of people,
Well, maybe other people know what radical transparency is. What do you think radical transparency is? These are
¿qué
words
piensas
we know.
tú que es transparencia radical?
Sofía and then Tareke.
Ser sincero con uno mismo cuando hay algo que te incomoda, si te vas de
A los demás.
sincere with yourself when something is uncomfortable to you and be able to express that.
Being sincere with yourself when something is uncomfortable to you and be able to express.
fail open, coherencia y autenticidad.
Coherence and authenticity. Coherencia y autenticidad.
Reconocer que dentro de ti también vive una parte de aquello que más te gusta.
Reconocer que adentro de ti también vive una parte de aquello que también detestas. To recognize something in you, that something lives in you sometimes that you're not, that you detest, that you don't like.
Did you have something else to say?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Radical transparency in the
I'm
individual.
going to give an example that nobody, I think, in this city has able to verbalize in front of the public. But
I'm going to give an example that I don't think anyone in this city has been able to verbalize in public.
Yeah, Twiggy, I meet Twiggy in 15 M.
I meet Twiggy in 15 M.
And we were surrounded and we made many amazing activities.
Nos conocimos el 5M y estamos rodeados del 15M y estamos rodeados de muchos activistas impresionantes.
But as well, it was the hypocrites that talks in the Bible. Hypocrisy people that talks in Bible, in the Bible.
In the Bible.
On the Bible. Until now, nobody verbalized in public who are them. Because they have so much power. Not just in social movement, but as well in the institutions. They grow up. Bueno, es un movimiento social, a ver, es un grupo que trabaja muy bien.
Es un grupo que trabaja muy bien.
A lo mejor hay alguno aquí. A lo mejor hay algunos. Yo solo quiero dar el ejemplo de transparencia radical. Hemos sido testigos de esta persona, que es madre de familia, activista, trabajadora, como yo. Hemos sido testigos de que activistas dentro del movimiento 15M han utilizado sus recursos, sus contactos para saltar a las instituciones, para vengarse de otras personas, para lucrarse del trabajo de los demás. ¿Y eso es cómo se llama? El patio de maravillas. El patio de maravillas, que es un grupo que lleva trabajando aquí, ¿cuántos? A lo mejor 30 años. Es un grupo numeroso de unas 60, 80 personas que trabajan muy bien, abren espacios ocupados y dicen a la gente venir. Y todos trabajan gratuitamente para ello. Pero luego cogen subvenciones del Estado, no les pagan a los Black Lives Matter que cogen, porque les tratan como esclavos, y después se benefician, compran sus edificios, sus furgonetas. Ellos son patio de maravillas. A lo mejor si hay alguno aquí, como yo, a mí nadie me paga, lo puedo decir. Pero eso es transparencia radical. Puede hablar, si hay alguien del Patio de Maravillas que quiera defenderse, puede hablar, pero son los hipócritas que tenemos en esta ciudad, que se lucran de los movimientos sociales en beneficio suyo.
Bueno, en realidad no creo que eso no sea Patio de Maravillas como nombre, sino personas que van a determinados sitios, un grupo concreto, cogen ese nombre para lucrarse, pero no son todos, no es todo Patio de Maravillas, no es todo tal, no es todo cual. Simplemente un grupo concreto se dedica a ir a sitios para lucrarse en el trabajo común de los demás.
You understand? Do you understand, guys, the New Yorkers?
No.
Okay. They are activities that are working for 30 years. They occupy spaces. They bring hundreds of people working for the movement, but they use them. They use them for money. So they do their own association that they don't pay people. They get profit. They do through voluntary work. They get support from the government. They even got the mayor some years ago. That's the radical transparency. To be able to say in a public square who are the ones that are not active, but they are the people. No, they use people.
They take the money of the bars, and normally in unoccupied places you have a bar to entertain people and you pay money, but so this money, some people take it for themselves.
Every occupied place, they do a bar with voluntary blacks people, black, count the black, but the black doesn't touch the cash machine. Just one person who take it and come into the underwear drawer of it.
Okay.
So that's radical transparency. Thank you. Yeah, it's human. So we say that everywhere.
Pero te refieres a empresa pública, empresa privada o sitios de activismo.
Han hecho mucho, pero
exacto.
También.
Por eso, pero que todas estas personas hacen mucho daño a todos los movimientos, porque al final generan un problema, ¿no? Porque nadie te cree. Yo creo que son muy conscientes, Sí lo son. Algunas no, pero son bastante conscientes.
We say that it's not just social movement, but personal. People do that, or do that as well.
People who are active and active a lot, but sometimes they also encourage things that are not. Sometimes they kind of find themselves.
So I just encourage you to point by radical transparency to people that are not doing good. See, this person was doing that, and many enemies he got by showing their corruption. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One more question or response.
How do we do this radical transparency without attacking the other, with care? I'm translating for her. She's saying that.
David was describing how we do this.
Maybe someone can translate that. Is someone here?
We're back. Amazing. Thanks, John. All right. So there weren't a load of breakout rooms. Right, we're down to 13 people. Oh, maybe we're waiting for more to come back in. Is that right, John? Yeah, okay.
everyone should come back in automatically in about 10 seconds. What usually happens if you get people to talk to each other is that they get terrified and run away.
I know. Oh, there you go.
We had a bit of that. Okay.
Maria, do you want to lead this next bit?
Okay. Oh, sure.
I think what would be good. Maybe if we hear back from maybe 2 or 3 people, just a little bit, you know. Why not?
Okay, so we ask like three groups to speak with their representative.
Yeah,
to
people
share.
People
Okay.
would just volunteer. Yeah.
Okay, volunteer. Just 3 points of what you have discussed about these questions about care and freedom, communities of care, the politics of care, the practice of care. Yeah, in the square, from the square. Anybody from the square wants to speak? Come on, any volunteer? Any thought about care and freedom and the need of them?
Looks like it's an interview for you to lead, Jamie.
Tommy, I saw you take your mic off. Go on, go for it.
That was a mistake. Oh my goodness. Might have been off this whole time. New and I had a fantastic conversation about consciousness and how it can have a physical effect on things, and scientific studies that are revealing how, you know, we have yet to discover so much about, you know, care and thought and the power of that. And then we went off on lots of tangents, and it was a fun conversation. It's fantastic to meet you, New. And you can fill in any detail. I am. Jump in
Thank
there.
you. Yeah, I guess I was just telling Tommy about these two experiments that I thought David would have really loved and would have been fascinated by. And one of them involved the putting a plant in the center of a dark room and having a random number generator decide where a source of light would come and would shine in different parts of the room. And technically, the number generator would just generate random numbers so that the light would appear at random parts of the room. But what they found out, which was astonishing, was that given a large enough sample, the light would actually center mostly in the center right over the plant. And so the suggestion is that something as rudimentary as a plant, that the plant had basically, I wouldn't say consciousness, but it could interact with the outer world in ways that science has yet to fully understand and to measure. And the second, so that was one experiment. Another experiment was that mathematicians have placed like random number generators around the world to see if there was something that you could call a collective consciousness. And what they found was that when there was a major global event, that these random number generators would actually demonstrate some kind of coherence. So I guess the numbers would kind of come up with a coherent pattern. And the first spike, I think, was the death of Princess Diana, and then the second one was the crash of the Concorde jet. But the biggest one was during 9/11, where all these like random number number generators, actually generated a kind of, I guess, measurable coherence. So, I was just telling him there are just all these experiments to suggest that people are actually connected through consciousness in ways that science is only starting to understand. and those were just two experiments that I know David would have loved. And you know, I think one can only speculate what he would say, but you know, I just I wish he was here to actually comment on that. But anyway, just to say that we're all physically connected.
That's a
Beautiful.
great breakout room that you guys are in. Thank you. I know that David was really a big fan of Extinction Rebellion, and one thing that we were saying from the start, I don't know exactly where it came from, but they were saying that along the lines of what you two were discussing, the potential for human consciousness, and they were saying it's like we're sitting in front of a violin at the moment and banging on it with a spoon. You know, so a note comes out occasionally and everyone goes, whoa. So what you're saying is people, you know, really, it really resonates with people, the idea of that, you know, there's so much more to learn. Maria, over to you.
Well, we continue with other more volunteer to feed here the group, or we go to the square to see what is going on and to move with them, to start moving a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, it depends. If there's anyone here from a breakout room who wants to feedback what was being discussed still, that would be great. Don't feel obliged, obviously. Rob, Rob or Steve, do you want to feedback from ours maybe, if you're up for it? About care and freedom?
No, thank you. No, thank you. It's too difficult.
Feedback meaning with me saying what I said about life and knowledge. Okay, well, I'm afraid to say that my reading of economic literature on climate change is that, courtesy of that literature, we've delayed actions for 50 years, and we have therefore massively overshot the sustainable usage of the planet, so that we are going to go through catastrophic collapse. And in that catastrophic collapse, I used at one stage the analogy of the seven, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid of 7 levels of sophistication of needs. Or down the bottom, you've got sheer survival. Up the top, you've got whether you go to the opera or a rock concert. And I was saying our conversations tend to be ones at the 7th level. Well, if the whole 5 levels below us disappear, then the real question is survival. And in that situation, what we need to do is to consider how can we sustain life on the planet, first and foremost. Secondly, how can we sustain what is left of what we've developed in the way of human knowledge, which is phenomenal. When you think about what we know about the universe, is incredible. And it would be a tragedy beyond anything that happened in the Middle Ages to lose that knowledge. And the third thing is human life. We come third, not first. And that means, I think, a future world which will unfortunately have a period which is authoritarian to restrain human impact upon the biosphere, to drag it back to the point where there's some chance of it being sustainable, some chance of human civilization surviving, and some chance of the knowledge we've accumulated still being there. And that doesn't mean encyclopedias. That means knowing, as Elon Musk puts it, how to make the machine that makes the machines. If we lose that knowledge, we might as well be back to the Stone Age. So that's what I think is the priority. And in that case, I can see us going through a period of authoritarian rule. And if we don't, the final analogy I used was that rather than having the bottom layer of Maslow's pyramid, we'll just have sand.
Steve, thank you for the reality check. Yeah. Do you want to intro this colourful band down there? You're
so, hello. So
go back to the square.
Okay. Yes. Let's go to the square.
So can you hear us down there, folks? We're ready for you to take it away. You're on mute down in the square. I'll text them.
I've just done the same, Jamie, asking them to unmute, but you do it as well.
En una quebrada oscura, triste se quejaba un león, y en el quejido decía: Cúpido se halló en la sierra, en traje de cazador, diciendo que mueran, mueran los que no sepan de amor. Ya se van las golondrinas a los campos ahora, por el cielo van diciendo a otra sierra vamos a entrar.
So beautiful in the square. Thank you. People are asking, what is that song? Does anyone know what? Does anyone know? Does anyone able to tell us what that song was? A number of people were asking. Does anyone know? No. We'll try and find out.
Yeah. I couldn't hear in Spanish what they were telling me. So.
Okay. So we got some beautiful, colourful moves going on down there.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been 3 hours, so that's a long time for people. Yeah, I think it's been beautiful. Should we get Nika to say goodbye? Okay, Kelly, thanks for coming. I'm going to see if I can get Nika to close the ceremony. Is that good, Maria? Does that sound a good idea?
I think so. I think the energy is going in that way now. Yeah, we can finish.
Everyone's got very keen on what's happening in the square. They've sort of forgotten about Zoom. Okay, we are keen to close the ceremony. Thanks so much to everybody who's come. It's been really beautiful.
Thank you to you and Maria for moderating so generously, you two.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. It's an honor. You know, when people say it's an honor, it literally is an honor. Can you come to the microphone? So I'm just asking, yes. Oh my God, yes, yes, yes. Brilliant. I think that's going to happen. Thanks for helping out, John. You know, no tech disasters. Thank you to Rob for your pink filter. There's been a sort of 70s psychedelic album vibe going on here. It's to do with the colors or something. I don't know. I know David would have liked. He liked the pink boat. So I think Nika's going to come and close the ceremony for us. It's been, I don't know how all the conversations were. The conversation that we had in our breakout room was just electric and between strangers, and that's what was always beautiful about about Occupy was to realize we've got so much more in common than sets us apart. That's what it was all about, you know. And in fact, very quickly, when you start listening to people, the stuff that was your differences become really embarrassing. All right, Nika, come and speak to us. Come and speak to us. Here we go, folks. Come. Are you able to speak to Nika or easily, or John? Yes, Nika, great, rock and roll.
How can you turn off Jenny so he can speak?
Okay, Nika, are you going to close the ceremony for us?
It's the volume on the TV. Hold on.
We can hear your voices, but quite faintly. I think it's because you're far away from the microphone.
Yeah, bring Nika to the microphone. Bring Nika to the microphone.
I think you're right, Yufan. I think they probably can't hear us very well. It's probably running off a laptop.
Maybe yes.
Sort of a mixture between shouting into the microphone and frantic texting. Are we just saying goodbye? Are we saying goodbye? Okay. Keep it lit. Care and freedom. Keep it lit. Keep playing the violin.
Bye. Thank you for coming. Gracias por venir.
Beautiful bit of
Bienvenidos.
jazz.
Adiós, compañeros.
Adiós.
Compas.
Thank you so much. Have fun.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Soon, hoping.
Keep it lit. Beautiful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hi, thank you.
I'm new to this game.
We're all new.
Yeah. I've been preoccupied over here though. Bye.
Todos los paraísos en libertad, cada vez me pregunté a dónde vas. Quisiera hacer espuma de volar el mar. Quisiera hacer espuma de mar. Quisiera hacer espuma de volar el mar. Que llegue hasta la orilla y vuelva atrás. Que llegue hasta la orilla y vuelva atrás. En libertad, por todos paraísos. En libertad, que nadie me pregunte a dónde vas. Beso cada día al despertar. Un beso cada día al despertar. Un beso cada día al despertar. Al despertar. De la noche de libertad. De la noche de libertad. En libertad. Todos los paraísos. En libertad. Que nadie me pregunte a dónde vas.
Thank you.